Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 131. Dennis Schrader here with Kasper Rosalowski, breaking down some fun fights coming up this weekend in the UFC. Isn't that right, Cass?
Oh, yes. We have a very, very sexy show. A lot of discussion. It is all going to be based around UFC 213 and, of course, the Ultimate Fighter 25 Redemption finale. It is a very fun weekend this coming weekend if you're a fight fan. So we're going to be talking about all those fights, breaking down the main cards and all the big fights and the main cards there. We've got some fun guests. Sean Sheehan of Severe MMA, as has basically become customary, is going to be on the program to give us some great technical analysis. Robin Black, who you guys all love, is going to be coming on the program to be breaking down and previewing fights as well. And then, of course, Damon Martin, our good friend, hashtag buffet buddy, hashtag turkey skin, returning to the program. It's already been too long. It hasn't been long, but it's been too long for us. Damon Martin's coming back to the program to preview UFC 213, talk about a bunch of things as well. You know, this Robbie Lawler, Cowboy Cerrone fight getting moved, what it means for the welterweight division. We're going to be talking about this whole Conor Khabib in Russia thing. Do we believe it? Is it really actually going to happen? Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn. A lot of controversy there. We're going to be talking about the aftermath with Damon Martin as well, and a whole bunch of other things. It's going to be a cheeky Spiderman preview. So it's a fun show, isn't it, Dennis?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And also, good friend Tommy Toehold is making an appearance in the program again, giving us some stuff to look forward to from the big weekend, UFC 213 Tough Redemption. And it's just a really great vibe going on. Of course, Australia is pumped. Whittaker going for this interim title, but there's a lot of fun fights on this weekend that have kind of been overshadowed a little bit. UFC 214 looking super sexy, very, very hot at the moment, but I think there's still a lot of great fights to talk about this week. Just want to quickly remind everybody as well that they can jump on social media and follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS and give us a like on Facebook. And Cass, we love the reviews, don't we?
Oh God, we love the reviews. God, we just like to be, you know, at our own houses in a nice bubble bath and just read reviews.
Satin sheets.
Yeah, satin sheets. You know, a nice cheese, maybe nice wine, or maybe nice vodka shots, and just read these reviews and just go, God, life is good. So if you feel like people are going to be like, all right, I'm going to give terrible reviews now. But if you are feeling kind, jump on, give us however many stars you feel we deserve. It actually helps us out a lot, helps the program a lot. If you give an iTunes review, iTunes, of course, looks at the program and goes, all right, people are rating this nicely, we're going to promote this a little bit more. So if you do feel like it, jump on, give a review, write whatever you want, and yeah, make our days. But without further ado, there is a lot of discussion to be had. UFC 213 / Ultimate Fighter 25 Redemption finale preview is basically underway, and I believe our first guest is on the line, and Dennis, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, our next guest is known for his amazing work with Severe MMA. You can also check out some of his content on Sherdog.com. He joins us here today to preview a very fun weekend of fights coming up this weekend with UFC 213 and Tough Redemption. I'm, of course, talking about our good friend Sean Sheehan coming all the way from Ireland. Sean, welcome to the program. Tell us, are you keeping warm right now? We like a warm Sean when he comes on the program.
It's actually lovely and warm, yeah. It's been warm for the last maybe 3 weeks or a month here. So it's beautiful. Probably about half as warm as it is in Australia. but
it is cold. It is cold down here, Sean. Me and Kasper, you know, we like to shoot this show in the morning a lot of the time, and it is very, very, very chilly. We can't have the heater on in the background, so we're like an old lady with a bunch of coats on top of us, swaying back and forth from time to time. But I'm just wondering, warm in Ireland, what is that? Like, I know you mentioned it's sort of half of what it is in Australia when it's warm. What kind of degrees are we talking about here?
3 degrees, Sean.
Are you Celsius or Fahrenheit?
We're Celsius, the right way.
Oh, yeah, good. We are too. So the hottest it'll ever be here is like, actually, about 3 weeks ago, it was 30 degrees Celsius, but that was unbelievably hot. The hottest it'll ever get. Yeah, so it's like maybe, it's like 11:30 at night now, so it's maybe like 10 degrees Celsius, and that's a bit warm for me even. Like I like it around there now.
10 is
you guys
warm.
wear tank tops. I know in Las Vegas, we've had friends tell us in Las Vegas when it's like hot, but it's not like in the 40s. People put on jumpers and stuff. So when it's like 10 Celsius over there in Ireland, are you putting on tank tops, T-shirts, going out for a bit of sun maybe?
I never wear a jumper or a coat. I t-shirt all year round. It could be literally -5 degrees and I'd be wearing a t-shirt all year round.
That's dedication. I feel like Australians are kind of like that as well, and it's rubbing off on us. Like here, it's, I don't know, like 5 degrees or something. That's actually not too bad, but I drove today and I was in shorts and a t-shirt, so I think some of it is rubbing off. While we're talking about Ireland, we got to talk about fights, Sean. And this is not the show where we bring you on and we discuss Mayweather, McGregor in depth, but we got to ask, since the fight's been announced, what is the buzz like in Ireland? You're there. You're in ground zero, boots on the ground. What are the people like? Is it crazy there?
It's been huge, really. Like there was a bit of a kind of a fall down in the whole MMA buzz because McGregor hasn't been fighting for the last while. Maybe for the last 3 or 4 months, it's kind of gone with this whole. I know the whole Mayweather fight was, when it was getting talked about, there was a lot of, just there was nothing solid, so there wasn't people talking about it. But now it's just all kind of started up again. Even you watch TV shows where just anyone connected to boxing or mostly boxing, but MMA as well, they ask them about it. It's one of the big points of view on, like we off the ball. It's the biggest kind of sports talk radio show here. They were talking about it, I believe, as well. And that Andy Lee, the boxer, he was talking about it. It's just the buzz. All the websites are on it. The kind of the man websites, as I like to call them. Yeah. They're all over it, and the papers and everything. So yeah, it's huge again. Even looking at our own numbers in the podcast and the website and stuff, it's just picked up hugely, in the last couple of weeks. So he is a huge draw over here. There's no doubt about it. I think a lot of people maybe didn't believe it for a while, but I think it's just pure and evident now. And it's a pity that the World Tour isn't coming here from what we've heard so far. Hopefully it does, but I don't think it will. But yeah, I don't think it'll really matter. I think it's absolutely huge here.
And I think one of the toughest things I know here in Australia as well, with this fight being so mainstream, just watching a lot of these breakfast hosts have no idea about fighting, try to break down what's going to happen. It's like, oh yeah, it's going to be a classic fight. That McGregor, he'll you get all these really terrible takes from people that have no idea about fighting because everybody's talking about it. One of the things I was going to say, Sean, is there a more sense of hope going around? Because I feel like since this Pacquiao Horn fight that happened over in Brisbane last weekend, a lot of people are like, well, Horn beat Pacquiao. Who knows? Maybe there's more of a chance now that McGregor's going to beat Mayweather. Who knows what's going to happen in this crazy world of boxing? Is that effect happening over there in Ireland as well? A lot of more people hopeful now? Have they always been super hopeful?
It's not hope. It's belief. People believe he's going to. I don't know. Like me personally now, I don't. I think Mayweather's.
They're going to kill you in Ireland, Sean.
But like I was at a wedding at the weekend, and I made it a point of asking people who they think could win the fight, and almost everyone said that McGregor's going to win, going to knock him out. It's amazing how he draws people in. He makes them believe all the time. It's absolutely amazing how he does it, and he's done it because he's kept proving it. A lot of people doubt him. There was the wrestler at first, then he beat Chad Mendes. Aldo, unbeaten in 9 years, beat him. This step after step, double champion, beating Nate Diaz at welterweight after losing to him the first time. Every step of the way, he has proved that he can do it. But this is a step into insanity here for me. So people still believe. They do. They genuinely believe. It's not a thing of hope. People believe. I met someone who had €150 on him to win by knockout. People, they genuinely believe in him.
Was it a part of the wedding, McGregor? Like, was there a McGregor cake that the bride came out to Notorious? Or was it like a part of a speech where they were supposed to thank people for attending and talk about their friend who's getting married? And they go, and by the way, Sean, just wondering, what do you think about that McGregor fight? What's the prediction for all of us out there? And the wife's like, what's going on? And he's like, keep it down. We're trying to find out what's going to happen in the big fight.
They should have got me up, but actually I'm friends with
they got you up.
No, they should have. I'm saying just get a preview going there. It would have been excellent. But I'm friends with the groom, and the bride's cousin, who I'd never met before, follows me on Twitter and stuff. Thank you, and started asking me, buying me drinks and all, asking me about the Mayweather fight. I was like, Jesus, man, come on! These people are going insane. Honestly, they're. It's madness over here.
It's probably a good thing that they didn't bring you up, because you would have gone out there and broken everybody's hearts and said, I don't think McGregor's going to win. You just would have heard like knives dropping and like the record skipping.
People leaving the wedding before it finishes.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some of the fights happening this weekend, because MMA fans have a very tasty weekend to look forward to between the TUF 25 finale and UFC 213. There's quite a few fights to discuss, so let's kick things off with Michael Johnson versus Justin Gaethje, Sean. It's a fight that should be fireworks. Do you think Justin will be able to seduce Johnson into yet another one of his famous brawls, or do you think Johnson will provide a bit of a rude awakening for Justin as sort of a step up in competition?
Yeah, I really think that's the key, what you hit on there with Justin Gaethje. Can he bring him into that war? If he can, I think he can definitely win. But if he can't, if Johnson can kind of stay on the outside, use his footwork, use his speed, and get off his power shots, I think he'll knock Justin Gaethje out, and I think he'll knock him out early, to be honest. But the thing is with Gaethje, and his competition before, it's not anywhere near the level of Michael Johnson. You know, he's fought some good guys, but would any of them be ranked in the top 15 in the UFC now? Would any of them be ranked in the top 30? You know, probably not at this stage. So, and that's said in a way that, right, he hasn't proved he can beat the top guys yet, but that doesn't mean that he can't. You know, it's not about the quality of the people you face, it's about your own quality. And if Justin Gaethje has the quality, and if he can do what he's been doing against the lesser guys, against the better guys, that could happen, and we'll see that. But for me, I see it's tough because just the way he fights, he's so open. Even in those fights with Luis Firmino, we saw him getting absolutely tagged up, bleeding and everything. He landed his own shots, he got the wins, but he's just such an open, exciting fighter. He's probably up there with the best fighters in the world to watch. But in the UFC against someone as good as Michael Johnson, I'm not sure if that will be able to take him through. I definitely fancy Johnson in this one. I just think that speed and power will be a little bit too much.
I'm very curious, because we saw against Nate Diaz, Johnson sort of played into Nate's game plan. So it really will be, I'll be curious to see if he goes into Gaethje's game plan as well. Now, before we talk about UFC 213, we're curious to get your thoughts on another important lightweight fight on that card, and that's, of course, mega prospect Marc Diakiese's next step towards stardom against Drakkar Klose. Now, Marc's one of the key figures at the moment that's flying that flag for UFC in Europe, specifically England. What do you think about the way the UFC are building him up and putting him up against Klose this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's a good matchup. I believe Klose is unbeaten as well. So two unbeaten prospects going in there. I remember I saw Diakiese in his fight against I think it was a Bama 22 where he got a really early knockout above in Dublin. And when you see someone knocking someone out so badly like that, you're kind of, I'd seen him before. He'd fought a couple of times for Bama before that, but when you kind of see it before your eyes like that, it kind of draws you in. And he's improved so much for that. Like I was talking to Graham, who does the podcast with me. He actually did a documentary on him a while back, and like he was making the point, Diakiese was making the point that he was more known of it as a grappler before that knockout, and before he got a couple more knockouts in Bama before coming to the UFC, and he's kind of transformed into this knockout artist. So he still has that base behind him. That's usually, even with guys like McGregor and other people who come from Ireland or the UK, it's always, will that wrestling base be there? But I think for Diakiese, it is there. And the fact that he's been training ATT as well for maybe around a year, 18 months now, that's going to do him very good. I think he has all the ability to be a UFC champion. I think he has the power. He has the technique. He kind of has the mind for it as well. He's a young family. He's willing to leave them and go to the other side of the world to train, to become what he wants to become. And, he's going to be very hard. Drakkar Klose as well. I like him. I think he's a good fighter. He came in against Devin Powell, who showed, in a couple of his fights as well, that he's well able to, to fight as well. 4 knockout wins. So, if he connects, I'm sure he could hurt Diakiese, but I definitely fancy Diakiese in that one.
Let's jump up to UFC 213. Still a very fun card, even though a couple of big fights have fallen through. Anthony Pettis, he takes on Jim Miller at UFC 213. I mean, he's been on a big dip over the last few years. There's no doubt about it since he's been champion, and he's needed a bit of a confidence boost for a while now. So how do you like this matchup with Jim Miller? And also, do you think he can get his feet under him at 155 and sort of find himself in title contention again and get a win against Miller this weekend?
I'm not sure about title contention, to be honest. I think the game has passed Pettis by a little bit. I think he's really good at what he does. I've always had this thing with Pettis. I think he's great everywhere, and that actually works against him, because lots of great fighters, they're great in certain areas, and then they use other parts of their game to keep the fight away from bad areas and get it to their good areas. But you see, say, another fighter, maybe like a JDS or something, if he got pushed against the fence, he'd try to get out, and then he'd try to land the knockout blow. Whereas Pettis, if he got pushed against the fence, he's trying to defend, he's trying to turn around, he'll push you against the fence, he'll hold you there. We saw that against Eddie Alvarez, that fight where, he ended up losing that fight basically because he did that. His footwork has always been a problem. And I've seen the footwork improve a little bit, but every other aspect, he's very good everywhere. But it's not just improving. I think it's his overall game. His actual MMA IQ, kind of, I don't know, it's just not there. And at this stage of MMA in 2017, you just can't get away with that. I think a few years ago you definitely could. But saying that, I still think he can win this fight. I think Jim Miller is a very, very good fighter as well, but he's shoving on in age. I think Pettis will be dangerous everywhere. If he can, if Miller takes him down, I could see Pettis submitting him. If it stays on the field, I definitely think Pettis will have the better of it. But Pettis has won his last 3 wins are all by submission. So if it goes bad for Miller on the feet, he goes for the takedown. I could see Pettis getting an old guillotine there or something on him and win him in that fashion.
The thing I like about it is that the way they match up, you either way, regardless of who wins, you're probably going to get a really fun fight. Moving up the card to the rubber match that a lot of people have been looking forward to. It's a fascinating fight, and that's of course Overeem and Werdum. In your opinion, when you look at both fighters from a technical perspective, what is the biggest difference between both the Overeem and the Werdum that fought years ago back in Strikeforce, Sean?
I think they're hugely different fighters from back then. I think Overeem, the fact I think it was 10 times he's been knocked out in the last few years. That that's an absolutely huge number. And he's had to refine his style for then. Now, his last, I think it's 6 fights, he's won 5 of them, with the exception being the Stipe Miocic fight. And a lot of those fights, he has, that more refined style. I remember, I think it was Stefan Struve where he took him down. He finished him there. The Junior Dos Santos fight, I thought was very, very good. He was defensive. And then he saw one opening and got the finish. I think he's changed a lot in that way. He was way more open for. I remember against Brock Lesnar, throwing all those knees pure open, but got his face cut up by Brock Lesnar at one stage, and he's done that lots of other times. We saw it against Ben Rothwell as well when he got finished, and Bigfoot Silva as well. Whereas Werdum, I think he's still kind of the same fighter on the ground, where he'll get hit once and he'll go down to his back acting like he's hurt and try to get you into his guard. He's a really tricky guy. But he's improved an awful lot on the feet as well. Now, I don't think he's to the standard of Overeem quite yet, although he did pretty well in their last fight when his improvements were kind of just starting. But I think he's a good Muay Thai style when he chooses to use it. But, on the feet, I think you'd have to favour Overeem just based on those, refined improvements that he's made. If it was gone in kind of willy-nilly for the finish, hard, you're going to leave openings, and at heavyweight, anyone can get knocked out. But yeah, I don't think he's going to do that now. But as I said, it's one of those, striker versus grappler, but both are good. One's a good grappler, one's a good striker as well. But I think if it goes to the ground, Werdum obviously has a very, very good chance. But if it stays standing, you'd obviously favour Overeem.
I mean, both guys have lost to Stipe via first round KO. Are you sort of looking at this fight as a title eliminator over, say, Francis Ngannou if he beats Junior Dos Santos? Or do you think Cain Velasquez could still be in the running if he comes back in time?
It's hard to answer that one because, Cain, he's so many injuries and everything like that. By putting this matchup together and by putting JDS and Ngannou together, you think it might be a time for Cain to be put in there. But maybe if Overeem, if Overeem gets to win here, is that gonna get him a rematch? I don't think so. Werdum, maybe, because it was such a kind of a quick knockout, but I don't think so. I think whoever wins this will have to get one or two more, especially if Ngannou goes in there and knocks out JDS, in devastating fashion. if Kane doesn't get that title fight, it's going to be very, very hard to deny him, I think, against Stipe. He's kind of the coming man, and I think him against Stipe could do very, very well.
I think that'd be a great fight. And I'm with you. I know Overeem is very adamant that if he wins, he's going to get a title rematch. I don't see that happening. Same with Werdum. Let's move on because we're running out of time. Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker, they're both finally ready to see their dreams come true as they fight for the interim middleweight belt. With Michael Bisping being very much overlooked by the majority of the division, do you think that despite the interim label on this fight, we might actually be seeing a battle between the two best middleweights in the UFC? What do you think, Sean?
You know what? I think you probably are. Yeah, Yoel Romero, I think he is the best middleweight in the division, but I think Robert Whittaker is very, very close. I find this matchup very, very hard to decide who's going to win, to be honest. Yeah. I think Whittaker's probably going to be winning until the second the fight is over, whether that is, a minute in when he wins, a minute in when Romero wins, 4 rounds in when he wins, 4 rounds in when Romero wins, or if it goes to the end. Romero's one of those guys. I think 5 wins in his 5 out of his last 7 fights have ended in a third round finish. He's one of those guys, he can just finish it anywhere. Look at that Chris Weidman fight where he just bludgeoned his head. He did the same against Clifford Starks, I believe it was, in his UFC debut. He can do it. Remember the Lyoto Machida fight? He's done it so many times. Whittaker, for me, though, he's one of the most technically sound fighters, just an improving fighter. He reminds me a little bit of Max Holloway. We saw him against Court McGeehan, against Stephen Thompson, losing like Holloway lost, early fights to McGregor and others, and he just come on. I think he's 6-0 at middleweight now. But the worrying thing, that Stephen Thompson fight, when Thompson landed those big shots, 3, 4, 5 shots, it started to tell on Whittaker. And I'm not saying he has a bad chin or anything now, but some guys can just come through that and get absolute, take an absolute beating and come through it. If Stephen Thompson can do that to him, and I know Thompson's an absolute whiz in the striking and he's a lot faster, and maybe it'd be easier for him to land than it will for Romero, but Romero is so fast as well, so athletic and way more powerful than Wonderboy Thompson. That's just an issue. But if that happens, if he can land all those shots, I think Romero will win. But I think Whittaker is good enough defensively. He's good enough at picking guys off to be winning this fight, for as long as it goes. I honestly can't pick this fight. I'm picking Whittaker, but I really, really don't know.
Yeah, it's a fascinating matchup. And also, I know you mentioned the Thompson fight, but then we find out how much those weight cuts were taken away from Whittaker and how he was losing all these abilities when he was making those weight cuts. So I wonder what his chin is like when it's under fire at the middleweight division, because that's going to be interesting as well. I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned how great Whittaker is, at the get-go of the fight, and how, we know Romero is great, but also if this does go the 5 rounds, what do you think, Sean? Do you think Whittaker has a good chance of winning at the beginning of the fight, or if it drags out to the last couple of rounds? Because, Romero is huge. He's got all that muscle on him. Do you think as the fight goes on, if it does get to that 4th or 5th round, Whittaker will be the fresher guy?
Everything in your head tells you that Whittaker, very good cardio. We've seen him, go along before. Romero, as you said, muscle bound, big guy, carrying a lot of weight. But then, as I said, that 5 third round knockout wins or third round finishes in 7 fights. His cardio isn't bad. He's still fighting into the third round. But I suppose we look back at the Tim Kennedy fight, where he kind of gassed out and was very tired, but he came back and won that in the third round as well.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of going on as well. I think he will. If Whittaker can weather the early storm in the first 2, 1, 2, 3 rounds, if it gets into the 4th and 5th, I think that Whittaker will have the better stamina, better cardio than Romero. But we just don't know, to be honest. And it's hard to question someone who has that record of third round finishes for having bad cardio. We simply don't know. He's never been to a 4th and 5th round, so time will tell. There's actually so many unknowns in this fight. As well with Whittaker, he went in and destroyed Jacare, but he's never really fought that many high level people before that. He's fought good guys like Derek Brunson, Rafael Natal, Uriah Hall, Brad Tavares. Some of them actually with a similar kind of explosive style to what Romero has. So that'll stand him in good stead. But as I say, it's a tough one. I haven't a clue. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was that Natal fight. Now, Natal obviously not a title contender. That was a pretty tough fight for Whittaker as well. So, I don't know. It's a tantalizing matchup because of those very unknowns that you mentioned. Let's move over to the main event, Sean. You look at this fight, and after beating known stars and staples of the women's bantamweight division in Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey, do you think Amanda Nunes sort of has quietly become the UFC's new biggest star at 135, the women's division?
Yeah, I think she has now at this stage. I actually think Holly became a very big star because a lot of people didn't like Rousey and kind of, she kind of, I don't know, in pro wrestling when you kind of put someone over and you kind of take their stardom. I think she did that a little bit. By the time Nunes came around to destroy Rousey, as that happened, that was kind of worn off a little bit. It was a big fight as well, but I think that fight was more about Rousey, kind of it being the end to her reign of dominance, whereas the home fight was home shocking the world, if you know what I mean. So she has a little bit, but I don't think as much as, obviously she didn't have as much as Ronda have, and I don't think she even has as much as Holly Holm, but as a fighter, I think she's top of the pile, definitely.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the UFC do put her in these great positions. I mean, UFC 200, headlining that against, Miesha Tate, now International Fight Week, once again, 213. She's right up there as well, and the Ronda Rousey fight was great too. So she's slowly building that notoriety. Let's talk about the actual fight, though, because in their first fight, a lot of people felt that Valentina was picking up steam in the third round while Nunes was slowing down. If Nunes can't sort of stop her in the early rounds, how much of a difference do you think the extra 2 rounds will make? Do you think Valentina wins it in the later rounds?
100%. I was writing my preview for this fight today, and I think that's the key to this fight. That's a huge difference, obviously, between the first fight. Amanda Nunes in all of her fights, she said it. I think it was after the possibly the Miesha Tate or the Ronda Rousey fight that her cardio issues were gone. People thought she can't go into the third and fourth round. Obviously, she finished those early, but she said those issues are gone, but are they gone? That's the thing about it. And it's not a case of her having bad cardio or anything like that. It's the case the way she fights. She is a powerful attacking athlete, and she goes hard for it, and that's what makes her great. She goes in early and she tries to get the knockout. Lots of other people do that. Look at Vitor Belfort. He's a similar type of fighter. Even McGregor, prior to the Diaz fight, he showed up in the Diaz fight and he changed around for the second Diaz fight. Lots of fighters are like that. They're first, second round fighters. And Nunes, for me, up until now, she has been like that. But then you have to look at, can she refine that? Can she change her game plan? Because remember, they have fought before, and this is kind of played out in the way we think it's going to play out again, where Nunes was doing well the first and second round. Then Shevchenko, preyed on her when she got tired, started landing beautiful knees up the middle when she was getting sloppy takedowns, Shevchenko in that fight she was picking her shots very well in the first 2 rounds, but she was very, very defensive, and the output just wasn't there. But she didn't up her output per se, in a kind of a direct way. She didn't go all out for the win. What happened was Nunes got tired, and she started getting, as I say, sloppy with the takedowns, but also coming in with sloppy striking and allowed Shevchenko to just pick her off easily. If that happens again this time, and she has an extra 2 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised if Valentina Shevchenko got the finish here. But it's a weird one because Nunes beat her the first time, and I think she's the best fighter in the division. But I also think Valentina Shevchenko is a horrendous matchup for her. And I'm picking Shevchenko here to win.
And just quickly on that fight, Valentina, she's so disciplined in those early rounds. If you're Nunes, and I guess she believes she has the cardio, but let's say she doesn't. How do you get Valentina to open up in those early rounds to sort of create those opportunities to actually get that win like Nunes has been doing recently in the early rounds?
I think the key for her could be the wrestling. In the first fight, there was a big gap in the wrestling ability, I think, and the grappling ability as a whole. When Nunes took her down, or when they kind of clinched and she got down, Shevchenko kind of looked like a fish out of water. She didn't look good at all. Now, when they get clinched, she's very good at strikes, landing elbows in the middle. Her takedown defense is usually good, but I think Nunes is just a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, and that's definitely an area which she can get to not only take Shevchenko out of her rhythm, as you say, but to spare her own cardio and stuff as well. If she does that for 2 or 3 rounds, it might, ease back from landing, 20, 30 power shots around. So, you know, if the fight goes longer, that could be another thing. But as I said, Nunes is a little bit like Justin Gaethje as well. She goes out and throws it all in the first 2 rounds, and with Gaethje as well, can they refine it? You know, can they change their style for a fight like this, for a specific matchup? I suppose that's definitely the key to it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting fight. Like you mentioned, a tough test for Nunes. Now, Sean, before we let you go, we just want to quickly grab some official predictions. So let's kick it off with the Michael Johnson-Justin Gaethje fight. How do you feel this one's going to end?
I think Michael Johnson's going to knock him out in the first round.
Wow, bold prediction there. It's going to be fun while it lasts. Anthony Pettis versus Jim Miller. What's the official pick there?
I'm going for Pettis by submission.
Any round that sort of gives you a good feeling? I know we're asking a lot.
Let me think. I'm gonna go second round. I don't know why, but there you go.
It's a good round.
I feel like you were dragging that ad just so we'd buy you a beer like at the wedding. I think McGregor's gonna win by another beer, please. You're like one of those hotlines that you call that charge $5 every minute. All right, Fabricio Werdum versus Alistair Overeem. What's the pick here?
Yeah, I think this could go to a decision, but maybe Overeem late. You know, if Werdum does get a bit wild, if Overeem frustrates him for the first 1 or 2 rounds, you know, he could do a little bit of butt scooting again, like in the last fight. And hopefully it doesn't go as bad as that. But I think Overeem will probably win the first 2 rounds, and then Werdum will be forced to come out and go hard for it. And I think Overeem could end up getting the finish in. So I'm going to go round 3 KO Overeem.
I don't disagree. The one that you have a lot of, and I'm not going to lie, I have a really hard time picking this one as well, but Yoel Romero, Robert Whittaker, gun to your head, you know, the family being held captive, and the ransom holders are like, we just want one thing, a prediction for Romero versus Whittaker. What are you saying, Sean?
Keep the family, just take them.
Hey, I'm with you.
Yeah, God, I don't know. I have 2 predictions. I think Yoel Romero will either get a big knockout, or Whittaker will finish him in the 4th or 5th round. I'm going to go Whittaker, 4th or 5th round.
A lot of Sean making a lot of Aussie fans right now. And finally, main event, Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko. What's the official pick for this one? What round do you think it finishes?
I'm going the same as my last one, a 4th or 5th round finish for Valentina Shevchenko. I think I'm going to go 5th round finish Valentina Shevchenko.
Well, there you guys go. Sean, thanks so much for coming on the program. Guys, you can follow Sean on Twitter at SeanSheehanBA. Make sure to check out Severe MMA. We're one of the best podcasts out there. Our friends over there. Make sure to listen to them. The new podcast has just come out. They preview a lot of the stuff that we just previewed. Check it out. The conversation's great. Both guys are great, and the program is fantastic. Make sure to follow them as well at Severe MMA. And also check out Sean's work on Sherdog. Sean, again, thank you so much. We can't wait to check out how these fights play out. Wonder how the predictions will hold up. I have a feeling it's going to be tough for us as well when we go through these predictions ourselves. But nevertheless, we appreciate you not only gambling away your family and so you wouldn't have to make those predictions, but also coming on the program and giving us the goss. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me, lads. As always, my predictions will be terrible.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
Oh, man. Sean Sheehan. I always love having him on the program, and if it makes him feel any better, our predictions are probably going to be terrible as well, and you definitely shouldn't bet any money on them. But now, a little bit of a fun treat, the comedy stylings of a man, a cartoon, a myth, a legend who has been making MMA fans laugh for a long time, a friend of the program, and one of the nicest and funniest guys in all of MMA. We are, of course, talking about Tommy Toehold for some sexy comedy stylings. He's on the program right now. Tommy, when you're ready, take it away.
What's up, fight fans? I'm the Power Rangers movie of mixed martial arts, Tommy Toehold. And International Fight Week is upon us yet again, but this year feels a bit different. We lost our most kick-ass featured bout ever between Donald Cerrone and Robbie Lawler, and with the juggernaut that is UFC 214 and the impossible holy fucking shit they actually went and did it, Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, still looming this summer, UFC 213 feels a bit depleted. But oh how wrong you are, fight fans. Oh how fucking wrong you are. Here are the top 5 things you should 100% be looking forward to on this International Fight Week. Number 5. Hall of Fame speeches from Sakuraba, Faber, and Joe Silva. Now keep in mind, I have no idea if any of them are actually giving Hall of Fame speeches, but I guarantee you that if they do, it's gonna be something to look forward to. Sakuraba has the longest Wikipedia page in history, This man has done everything. He is 47 years old and his last fight was a year and a half ago. The Gracie Killer is going to have all kinds of awesome-ass stories to tell. Fuck a translator, we'll figure it out. Faber's been in this sport since like 1987. I'm pretty sure he'll have a bunch of awesome shit to say. Herb Dean, thumbs up. And Joe Silva, Joe motherfucking Silva. You've seen him 1,000 times. You know who he is. For years, he was the Shao Kahn in the shadows, behind Dana White's Shang Tsung, pulling all the strings, making all the matches. Have you ever heard Joe Silva speak? Have you ever heard that man speak? You're goddamn right you haven't. He is a man of mystery. He ran this whole MMA world for a long-ass time. Surely the best matchmaker ever. We'll have lots of fucking awesome shit to talk about. Number 4, the debut of Justin Gaethje in the UFC. Yeah, you fucking forgot, didn't you? There's a tough finale on Friday. This shit is getting serious. The UFC's not fucking around this week. And the main event sees Justin Gaethje take on Michael Johnson. Who is Justin Gaethje? Well, if you listen to this show, you probably know. But he is 17-0 and has been fucking shit up for what was the World Series of Fighting for a pretty good time now. But is he the real deal? Is he UFC caliber? He seems crazy as shit, I'll give him that. He's got a real, I don't care if I get CTE in my 60s kind of vibe. Not afraid to stand and bang. More heart than Rudy Whittaker. All that shit. But is he the real deal? Can he take the lightweight division? Well, we get to instantly judge him based on a single UFC fight this weekend. He'll either be praised as the second coming of Don Fry, or everyone will say, I told you so. Either way, that shit's gonna be a blast, and it's definitely something to look forward to. Number 3, random celebrity tweets. My favorite part of big UFC cards is finding out which random celebrities are suddenly interested in fighting. Now, I'm not talking about your Demi Lovatos or your AC Slaters. They are legit fight fans. I'm talking about some random-ass celeb who happens to have a project coming out in a week that tweets out the most boring, clearly written by their manager tweet about not being able to contain their fucking excitement over the main event. And then the announcers have to acknowledge it because somebody in the back made a graphic for it. So-and-so is fired up for the fights. It is the most ridiculous shit ever, and I fucking love it. I love it so much. It's so stupid and ridiculous, and it makes my fucking day, and I can guarantee you we will see some of that this weekend. The number 2 reason you should be psyched, Curtis Blades' name. Yeah, that's right, a name. With Lawler versus Cerrone off, Blades versus Daniel Omolinzik has been bumped up to the main card as the feature bout. Over Werdum and Overeem, over Pettis and Miller. But why, right? Those guys are clearly bigger names. Their names might be bigger, but their names aren't better than fucking Curtis Blades. Curtis Razor Blades, to be exact. Is that his middle name and not a nickname? I choose to believe so. In a world where everybody has names that aren't things, Shevchenko, Whittaker, Santos, Johnson, I guess Johnsons are things, but whatever. We get a guy who fights people for a living named Blades. Guys, that is fucking awesome. That's like Mortal Kombat come to life. It is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Besides number 1, which is Yoel Romero's post-fight interview. Now, is Yoel going to win this weekend? I don't know. He might not. Bobby Knuckles is fucking tough, but either way, there is a strong chance we're getting a Yoel Romero post-fight interview, and I'm gonna be honest here, almost every time they shove a microphone in that guy's face, it has been fucking hilarious. Who could forget the No4Gay Jesus mistranslation controversy? Or after decapitating Chris Weidman, marching around like a toy soldier for 20 minutes, and then telling Michael Bisping he loves him. This man is comedy gold, and it will be the highlight of International Fight Week. Those are 5 things you should be jacked about for UFC 213, and the week leading up to it. Submission Radio, you guys are so fucking awesome for having me on. I'm Tommy Toehold. Later, fight fans!
Wow, that was absolutely fucking awesome. We loved every second of that. Tommy Toehold, ladies and gentlemen, what a nice guy fitting us into his schedule and bringing some of that comedy gold. Joe Silva, the Shang Tsung of the UFC. I love it. Herb Dean, thumbs up. I laugh every single time. Justin Gaethje, the second coming of Don Fry. I fucking love it. Tommy Toehold, the best guy. Go to his YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tommy Toehold. Buy shit with his face on it. He is a friend of the program forever and ever. He really is the best. Thank you so much, Tommy, and we'll be back right after this.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my 2 favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys. Our next guest is absolutely killing it on his official YouTube channel with such videos like Robin's Breakdown, Mentality of Combat, Ask Robin, and Championship Rounds. He now joins us to preview UFC 213. Robin Black, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you today, man?
Hey, guys. Doing great. I am sitting on a rooftop of a hotel in Los Angeles.
Wow.
I have meetings this week about about brands sponsoring my YouTube channel. Thank you for mentioning it, by the way.
Nice.
And then I'm doing Brendan's Big Brown Breakdown on Thursday and going to Vegas on Friday. But best part of the week, talking to you guys.
That's it. Yeah, I bet you that's what you tell all the Australian podcasts that you're doing. But,
I was
Robin,
just talking to this Italian girl by the bar, and I was like, listen, I got to do this interview with these guys from Australia. She was like, wow, really? I'm like, yep, Australia.
Excellent.
I love it.
You gave her names, right? She'll be calling us later, Robin. You did us good.
Yeah. I said Casper. I mean, like she acted like she knew you. I don't know.
What about Dennis? What's going on, Robin? I mean, Casper, it's a catchy name. It's great. Dennis, it's a bit of an old-timey name. Talking about it the other day with someone. No, don't get many Dennises anymore. You've got one N. There's the things that are against me. You got to throw me a bone once in a while. Get an Italian girl my way as well.
All right. From this point forward today, I'm only talking about Dennis from Australia. No Casper.
Yes. Make sure to bring me up with Big Brown as well. I think that should be the discussion for most of the show. But quickly, with LA, I mean, we know you've got a lot of friends all over the place, and we imagine LA must be a really fun place for you to be. So apart from all the cool things that's going on with all sponsors and your big show, tell us, what's one of the highlights from LA that people might not expect Robin Black to have?
To be honest, this week, so I had this sponsor meeting, and I'm like, well, you still have to figure out how to pay bills, right? Roaming around the world and talking about fighting and just living your life as somebody who loves fighting. Awesome. But somebody has to pay for that. So there was a couple of brands in Los Angeles that said, come down and discuss it. So when I booked that, I thought, okay, while I'm down there, I'll do a bunch of other stuff. So I sent out some text messages to some friends. First guy back, Brendan Schaub. Hey, come on the show this week. And booked the flights, got everything planned. And once I got here and started sending some other messages, I realized everybody else is fucking off to Las Vegas. Everybody in the fight business this week. Today, as I'm speaking to you guys, it's July 4th. Nobody's around. And then July 5th, the people I talked to, like Boss Rutan and Josh Barnett and Morrow and people like that, they're like, yeah, sorry, bro, I'm going to L.A. on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So I'm keeping my meetings for Wednesday, and then I'm hanging with Brendan on Thursday because Brendan's a genius and he's fun to hang out with, and we squeeze weird stuff out of each other's brains. And then Thursday night, I'm going to Vegas now. So you have to figure out, when you're running your own business, you have to figure out how to pivot. So I was like, shit, nobody's here. So I have to go to where they are, which is Vegas. A couple of quick calls to Extreme Couture in Toronto, who's sponsoring part of our trip, and Hayabusa in Kingston, Ontario, who's sponsoring part of it. Next thing you know, you're in Vegas. This is what it is to be a self-employed MMA analyst. It's super fun, man. It's so fun. I'm having such a good time.
That's awesome. We're really happy for you. Genuinely, it's and we can relate to that a lot. It's a crazy life being an MMA media member. One day you're eating 2-minute noodles and tuna to survive, and you're fending off guys who are trying to foreclose your little studio, and the next day you're living it up in Vegas. So it's crazy fun. Speaking of Vegas, I mean, this weekend's going to be crazy. A lot of great fights. Tough 25 redemption finale, UFC 213. And that's what we talk about with you, Robin. Let's kick it off with this Werdum Overeem rematch. We were just speaking about it before. When both men fought last in Strikeforce in 2011, they were both very different fighters. A lot has changed. I guess the question is, do you think this fight in any way resembles their last fight in 2011, or do you think it's going to be completely different?
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you contextualize that for sure. It's tricky, the way everybody fights now, the whole understanding, the global understanding of the big picture of the game is changing so rapidly that our language that we use to describe it is way behind. So I like the way you put that instead of, hey, this guy's a grappler and this guy's a striker and which one has improved more. I mean, that's a conversation you guys and I would have had 3 years ago. Now the whole picture changes so rapidly that the question is, as it all blends together, who's better at the blending? Who's better at combining the colors and the textures and the flavors? And I got to think it's Overeem. At least for this minute, what we had seen before so if we're looking at fighting as formerly 2 or 3 or 4 art forms that are now becoming a collage. Who's better at creating that collage? And I still feel like Werdum is a very good painter and a very good writer and a very good illustrator. You know what I mean? As far as he's the best on the ground, he can figure out how to get you down, and he was very aggressive on the feet. But now this blending together and taking advantage of people's sort of over identities, I think Overeem's better at that. I think Overeem started to be way more subtle and way more manipulative in his game playing. And I just feel like at this stage of his career, the way that two guys who were very, very, very good on top of the game in like 2012, 2013, 2014, what direction do you take as you grow? And Overeem's direction is wise and manipulative. And I think that's the key. You know, whereas Werdum's has been try to get better at my weaknesses and you know, going all in on your strengths and combining that with sort of playing with the areas outside of the lines. I mean, I think that's where it's at. I think that's what Overeem's doing.
It's interesting that you mention that because, I mean, if we go back a few years, things would have flipped around. Werdum was the one that was fight by fight getting better and better, and Overeem was really struggling with his style and playing around with a few different things. And now things are kind of flipped around. And in his last couple of fights, you know, Werdum has gotten a lot of criticism. It wasn't like it was a few years ago where every fight people were super impressed with Werdum. Last couple of fights, I mean, he's had tough matchups, but he's looked a little bit slower. He hasn't really shown as much improvement in those fights. Well, Overeem in his last few fights, like you mentioned, has looked really, really good game plans. He switched things up. So my question to you is, what do you think is going on with Werdum? Is it something to do with age, motivation? Why do you think in his last few fights, even though he has had very, very tough competitors, and I mean that Stipe fight was very, very quick, but even that Travis Brown fight, why do you think it kind of looks like he's slowing down a little bit to fans and people watching his fights of late?
I like the way that you're like dancing around the fire here. Like you're circling the fire. Like
that's the slogan of Submission Radio. Submission Radio, dancing around the fire.
If I've missed out that is a slag, I meant it in. Okay, first of all, my ancestors. My father is part Native, so where I come from, dancing around the fire is celebrating a point.
Oh yeah. And just to clarify, Dennis said the slogan of Submission Radio, not the slag of Submission Radio. That's dancing around the fire is our bread and butter. It's what we do, Robin, on a weekly basis.
I love it. Well, I love it. I mean, realistically, that's how you find the truths, right? So much of our business, the flaws in what we've been doing for the last half decade is comparing striking, grappling, and takedown defense and strength. And then when that no longer served enough, we would add other topics. We'd say, well, also let's compare their accuracy and their cardio. And we just add list after list after list. And it isn't a game of let's hear your opinion on a topic. It's a game of let's figure out the whole thing. And so what I'm saying with the dancing around the fire is if we back out and we look at that 4, 5, or 6 year period you're looking at, one guy was a little weaker for a few years while the other guy was stronger. But as we come out the back of that tunnel, that the roles flip. And what's happening there is one guy was thinking macro, big picture. How do I be the best I can be when all is said and done? So I'm not going to take the shortcuts. I'm not going to find the micro answers. I'm going to find the macro answer. I'm going to come out better than I was. And I think Werdum and his team were looking for the minute-to-minute answers. So if you got a business or a company, how do you solve the problem that in this quarter we're losing money? Well, I guess we better improve our striking. Okay, cool. We did that. Oh, wait. Then we start losing money again. Well, I guess we better work on our takedown defense. That's quarter-to-quarter reactions. Somebody else is like, you know what? Our company's not going to spend or lose a lot of money, but in 10 years, we're going to be huge. That's macro thinking. That's how are we going to be the best fighter in the world in 2018? And if you're a kid right now, you're 16, 17, 18 years old, you're the best fighter in your little sort of region, you got to figure out how to be the best fighter in 2025. And the answer to that is not being the best fighter in 2017. So it's a micro versus macro kind of idea. And that applies to all of us. You guys want to have the best fucking MMA podcast on planet Earth in 2021? It's not the same as getting the most clicks next week. It's not. We all know it. you know?
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. In terms of, I guess, how you see the fight playing out, and I know I'm dancing around the fire again, and I know it's a tricky process, but I guess what does Werdum have to do? Because like you, the way you're describing it, I'm leaning pretty heavily towards Overeem, and I think a lot of people are. What does Werdum have to do to sort of get this win the rubber match, kind of derail Overeem's macro thinking, and slide himself hopefully into title contention? Because we saw in the first fight, obviously there was a lot of butt scooting. How does he get around that this time?
The big thing for Werdum is what we have seen, like the hands that he's shown was, listen, man, I can sub all you all. So I will strike with you to such a degree that either you'll eventually shoot at me like Kane did, which is crazy. Like if you look at that moment in time, Werdum was like, I will pressure strike you till you try to take me down. And when you do, I'll submit you. You know, it made sense. It was the micro answer. It was the short-term answer. But the big picture game is what Stipe worked on for years, was just get better at the flow of the game. And I think that's what what Overeem's been working on. And Overeem's been getting smarter and craftier. And so for Werdum, I think, you know, there's two ways you win this fight. One is you go all in on what you used to do, which is get super aggressive. And next thing you know, Werdum submits Overeem in the first round. Isn't it crazy? Werdum's back. He's one of the greatest ever. Or you have to play a game of patience and subtlety and focus and play Overeem's game and try to fatigue him. And later on in round 3, then do that. And that's a lot harder, but it could be done if he made the commitment to being that kind of fighter over the last 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 weeks. If he hasn't, then go all in. I mean, I hate to use Misha Cirkunov as the example always, because he's a Toronto guy. Like, I fought for Extreme Couture for a long time. I like Misha. But when Misha got pushed to the limit that he was no longer capable of striking with his opponent, he had to just blitz. Your options are either you win in 2 minutes or you lose in 2 minutes. And I feel like Werdum is there unless he's changed the way he's thinking. Because Overeem is ready to take out every heavyweight not named Stipe Miocic right now.
Let's jump over to the big fight that all the Australians are really looking forward to. And that's, of course, this interim title fight between Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero. Both guys, again, these are two guys where very different points of their career. Yoel Romero, obviously an accomplished Olympic wrestler, someone that's been looking amazing those last few fights. Robert Whittaker, you know, making a huge splash in the middleweight division. He's very, very young and, you know, still scratching the surface. No one really knows the extent of his skills yet and what he's going to look like fight by fight. When you kind of look at this matchup, what goes through your head when you see the two sort of differences between these fighters going into the octagon at UFC 213?
I hate to argue with you, my friend, but I know what he looks like fight to fight. Like, I look at that kid and I can see that this is something very, very special. And there's a small category of these guys. And it may be a coincidence. I haven't figured it out. And I may not be the guy to figure it out. It might take a bigger brain than mine. But it may not be a coincidence that it's a guy like Whittaker who moves up a weight class, because he had to cut a lot when he was back at 170. And a guy like Kelvin Gastelum also moving up, where these guys are just manipulating space and forcing you to miss and forcing you to overextend and playing with their positioning in comparison to your weapons and manipulating your positioning in comparison to their weapons, and they're fucking good at it. And it's really cool to see. And it's among my favorite sort of type of fighter in 2017 to watch. And this guy's real good at it. Then you add to it the mindset. And the key to the Jacare fight was him saying, listen, when you go to the ground, you don't panic. When you go to the ground, you realize, I know each of these positions is a battle, and I fight to win each battle. When he was capable of stopping and finding the moments to shift the wave of, you know, the direction of the takedowns and the wrestling with a Jacare, and I believe a Jacare is a Cayman but it may also be a crocodile. I'm not exactly sure. But when you're capable of doing that with that, you can do it with Yoel Romero as well. Then we have Romero, who is enormous for 85. And when I talk to my guys over at American Top Team, they just literally jizz all over themselves talking about this guy's athleticism. Like they literally, Mike Brown, like all these guys, they are literally standing around just like, the super fans when I talk to them about how incredibly athletically talented and martial talented Yoel Romero is. So we have a spectacular fight. But for me, if you put the Bobby Knuckles of the world and the way that they are changing the game up against the super athlete, I'll take the Bobby Knuckles all the time. And I think that's the direction that we're going. Whether he wins or loses this fight, I think he'll be proven right in 2 years and 3 years and 4 years, where the Yoel Romeros of the world aren't touching the future Bobby Knuckles of the world. But so that's how I see it now. Are we there yet? I don't know. But did I say that the American Top Team guys jizzed all over themselves? Yes, I did.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, but that's where we're at. So this is the fight I'm most excited to see. I really am.
One of the things about Rob, as we've gotten to know him through his UFC run, is his mental game. It's something that we've noticed from the very get-go, where going into a fight, you can see mentally he's very, very strong. He doesn't let too much sort of bother him. And during fight night, the nerves, and it doesn't seem like they're affecting him as much as a lot of the other fighters. Have you been impressed by what you've seen from him with his mental abilities?
Yes, I have been super impressed. But it's tricky. I mean, what you see outwardly isn't necessarily the truth. However, it's my job. Like, it's what I've been dedicating my life to studying these guys and looking for body language and looking for, signs that they're giving us. And what I'm seeing is this guy's a rock. The big question is going forward is, how is he a rock? Why is he a rock? Is it because he admits all the challenges, recognizes everything that he's facing, and psychologically prepares for it? Then if so, then yeah, I mean, he could be unbreakable.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting theory, because whenever you speak to Rob, he's extremely humble, and he's not really the kind of guy who says, yeah, I'm going to go in there and destroy Yoel Romero. He's very honest about how good Romero is. He's a tough challenge, and I think in some ways maybe it takes pressure off him. I mean, it's a high-pressure situation no matter how you look at it, but I guess if you admit that, look, this is going to be very tough, you're not setting the stakes up for yourself too high. And I'm just curious, before we get off this fight, Robin, you did mention that you're sort of leaning towards a guy like Whittaker, an athlete like him, a guy who's sort of evolved to his point. What exactly, if you're leaning sort of towards him, how do you see him getting it done? Because a lot of people sort of think maybe, early is good for him before Romero gets a read on him. And the other X factor, there's so many X factors in this fight, is maybe in the later rounds when Romero potentially gasses. Even though he kills guys in the third round, do you see maybe Whittaker having advantages there?
For guys like this, and I'll say again the same thing about Kelvin Gastelum, also about Chad Laprise, who's fighting this weekend, either Friday or Saturday, I forget. But there's a lot of these young guys coming up now. When they're doing what they do well, they step out, you're driving forward, and you drive your chin into a punch from an angle that you can't see. And they do it over and over and over again. That is the game itself for them. They are the matador, you're the bull, but they're stabbing you in the face as they do it. So they can finish you early. They can finish you late in a round as they pick you apart. They can slow down and be concerned with the fact that maybe you'll get a hold of them and fade back. But the game itself is punishing you when you miss. And that can unfold in any number of ways. And that's what I think the game is here for this guy. And, the weird part for me as a fan and an analyst, or I guess a fanalist of Bobby Knuckles, is my favorite fight of his. The one that really makes me understand what he's capable of is when he fought Stephen Thompson. And he got knocked out, I believe. Knocked out or dropped and then finished in one way or another. And when you watch it, he was years away from where he is now. And during that fight, he's able to adapt. He's landing on, like, nobody was willing to go into that chaos with Stephen Thompson. Go back and watch that. Go on to Fight Pass and check that fight out. It really sets the stage for what he is now. And the more I talk with you guys about it, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm visualizing it. I'm picturing him laying out this big, incredible, talented, muscular, super wicked Cuban Olympian in the first or the second round. That's what I'm starting to picture.
Wow. Let's jump over to the main event. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Robin, because we all saw Amanda Nunes. She kind of put her fist in Shevchenko's face at the big press conference. There was a bit of trash talk going around. And, you know, some people trying to figure out exactly what her motivation behind that was. The obvious one is obviously to sell the fight. But the other one that's kind of lingering in the back of a lot of people's minds is Shevchenko is a very, very tough matchup for Nunes. And even though Nunes has had some incredible performances against Tate and Rousey, do you think a part of her was maybe a little bit nervous about this going into this matchup, knowing exactly how hard this fight is going to be against Shevchenko, UFC 213?
I mean, she should be nervous. I mean, and this goes back to what we were saying about Whittaker. You know, you have to recognize you're facing one of the great combat artists in the history of the world in front of hundreds of thousands of people, 15,000 in a room, you know, almost naked with the lights on you. Like, you have to acknowledge that truth. Once you acknowledge that truth, you realize, holy shit, I'm nervous. And she should be nervous. And to be a little nervous and try to push a little bit, and the interactions of them at the weigh-ins, the interactions of them at the press conferences, they're really interesting for us. It allows us things to talk about. But the truth is, so if you go back, you mentioned on my YouTube channel, one of the shows we do is the mentality of combat sports. I do it with David Mullins, who's a sports psychology consultant, and we were talking about Mayweather-McGregor. The real moments, the ones that are going to make a difference, are not the ones we're going to see on TV. Because when we see Mayweather-McGregor together, or Shevchenko and those two together, we see anyone together, those are a 2-minute moment with the spotlights on it. But there were car rides coming up. There were walks in the back coming up. There were glances exchanged. There were words exchanged. There were positions where who's going to walk through the door first and someone shoulders them out. There are millions and millions of moments that have the potential to influence the interaction between two athletes. And so the ones we want to, because we all share the experience of Amanda touching Shevchenko's chin, but the truth of the matter, when it influences the combat itself, it'll be moments that we will never see. It'll be whispered things between them. It'll be things they said to their own coach that they meant the other one to hear. There will be thousands and thousands of psychological interactions between these two athletes and any two athletes that we'll never see. So we spend a lot of time questioning that moment, but those moments are single moments, and there are so many of them. But this fight, for me, in the end, I think Shevchenko was built for war. And I think Amanda is a brilliant martial artist. So I think when you bring them together, something brilliant's going to happen. But you gun to my head right now, standing at the side of the pool here in LA. I'm saying that Shevchenko is going to start coming on in the later rounds.
Yeah, and I want to sort of open up on that. Why is that? And sort of to your point about the mentality, I find it fascinating to see how this is going to affect Amanda Nunes, just because, you know, she beat Misha. There was so much for her to gain there. Obviously the belt, and then she beat Ronda, a lot of things to gain there, and then you go here, and it's a woman she's already beaten in a really tough rematch, and she's not really the biggest name. She has arguably by far the least amount to gain from this fight, but you're picking Shevchenko. Why is that? Because I think you are kind of like us in the sense that we don't have much faith, or at least we question whether Amanda Nunes has the cardio to go 5 rounds, or at least put it on in the 4th and 5th. Would I be accurate in saying that?
Yeah. Well, you said a number of things there that actually I really dig. Among them is pointing out that unlike these other, life-changing fights, this is a fight. It's a fight in Vegas, This is my belt. It means a lot to me. But shit, I've already won the belt, taking it in the biggest night ever. Then I took out the biggest fighter ever. If I were to lose in this exchange, for a lifetime, I could be proud of these two. And I defended it against one of the biggest, like all of that is true. So it's something she needs to overcome. Now, it doesn't mean she can't. In fact, if she works with, psych consultants or great coaching, and I know she does, Mike Brown will sit down and have these discussions with her. It'll focus you on the fact that it's just a fight you need to win. So yes, but then the other points that you brought up that are really great are you bring up later round energy, like how much energy do you have saved to be able to perform later, and a lot of that relates to how much you put out in the beginning. And over the since Shevchenko and every fight since, we've seen Amanda just put it out. And that's great, unless it's not great. Because if you start to lose from that point on, so what do? Do you change that athlete and we could say the same thing about Vitor Belfort. Vitor wins in the first round, and if he doesn't, he loses as it wears on. Do you change Vitor Belfort, or do you go double down and have him win in the first round? And if you're Amanda Nunes, it's the same thing. Are we going to lose the advantages we had by pushing hard through rounds 1 and 2, and hope to be able to do better later? Or are we going to double down on those and try to get her out of there in the first 10? And I think if I'm Amanda's people, and we've never gone the other way, why don't we go that route? And why don't we push hard in the beginning?
I love that. That's a great point there, mate, Robin. Thank you so much for coming to the program, guys. Make sure to check out Robin's YouTube channel and follow him on Twitter at RobinBlackMMA. Such great work. Big congratulations. So happy things are going really well for you, Robin. We love the channel. We love what you're doing. Excited to hear what's next, and enjoy the fights. We really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And I'm just glad to be connected with you guys, so we do stuff together. It's like I'm thrilled with what you guys are doing, and I'm thrilled to be able to contribute something.
Awesome. We appreciate it. And I kind of love we're living in a world where we're here in Australia and you're on a rooftop in LA, a place that we'd love to be right now.
I know.
And we will be next month. Actually, no, later this month. So yeah, good times ahead. And yeah, as always, man, we appreciate you stopping by. We'll let you go, but thanks so much for jumping on with us, Robin.
Cheers, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a longtime friend of the program. You may know him as a part of the official Submission Radio Buffet team circa 2016, possibly 2017 as well. He now joins us on the program to break down some of the crazy news in the world of MMA and boxing, and also help us come up with our own predictions for the crazy fights that are happening this weekend. I am, of course, talking about Damon Martin, who is back on the program. Damon, welcome to Submission Radio. It's great to have you, man.
Wow, thanks for having me as always, boys. I appreciate it.
Tell you what, I was looking at your Twitter bio, as I always do. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm alone at home. And it says there that you're a veteran MMA reporter since 2003. Is that right? Jesus. Have you really been covering it for that long?
Yeah, I'm old. That's really what that bio says. I started covering mixed martial arts back in 2003 and 2004, and made my first UFC fight in 2000. I think my first fight was 2004 and then 2005. So yeah, it's been about 14 years now. It's been a long ride.
I guess one of the big things is that there's a lot to speak about on this episode, things to do with McGregor, Dana White, Khabib, UFC 214, UFC 213. But let's just be completely honest here. The biggest, by far, news and story of the past week has been the fact that Damon Martin, the man himself, the man who we've for a long time been introducing as, from his great work at Fox Sports, you are no longer with Fox Sports. You've moved on to other things. Fans are going crazy. Lay it on us, man. What exactly happened?
Well, basically here in the States, Fox Sports decided to, FoxSports.com, I should say, decided to focus, solely on video content rather than written content. So as of last Monday, the writers of the staff were let go. There was about 25 of us. at Fox Sports. So it's not just me. As much as I would love to make this story about me, it's not just me. It's guys that covered soccer, guys that covered NASCAR for more than a decade, guys that covered, basketball, football. I mean, everybody, lost their jobs. And so it was a kind of a rough couple days there, unfortunate that it happened. But it's also part of business. You can pick up and move on. And, I've already moved on a little bit. I'm doing some stuff for Flow Combat. I'm doing some stuff for MMA Weekly. And funny enough, in your neck of the woods, I'm actually doing some stuff for Fox Sports in Australia, which is kind of funny, but I'm actually doing some stuff for them as well. They're a separate, they're part of the Fox family technically, but they're kind of a separate company from the Fox Sports here in the United States. So I'm doing some stuff for them as well. So my stuff will still be getting out there. I'm still, writing on a regular basis. I'm still doing my Fight Society podcast. So no one's getting rid of me that easily, but yeah, it was unfortunate what happened at Fox Sports. If you read it, there's stories up on awfulannouncing.com if you want to read the whole sort of details about what actually happened. But it's an unfortunate situation, but you kind of pick up and you move on.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing about that situation that kind of dumbfounded me was just how much they want to focus on their video content. Because, I mean, even though it's always been a very successful thing, especially as of late, the writing, being able to jump on and read someone's article, whether it be your article or many of your colleagues over there at Fox Sports, I feel like they're underestimating how much value that has to people going on the website. When you see that happening at Fox Sports, and I know this is happening across a lot of different websites, what are your thoughts on this as someone who's been a journalist and in the writing game for a really long time? A lot of people going away from the writing and more focusing on this video content. Because to me personally, I love reading a good article. I know a lot of people do as well. To me, it feels like it's a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm never going to give up on the written word, and I think, written articles absolutely still have value. I think there are some things that you can get across in an article and an impact that you get from reading an article than even more than you do in a video. It's not to say video doesn't bring value. There's absolutely value in video, 100%. But I think that written content is always going to be a great, contemporary piece to that. Some of my favorite stories that I've written, a couple years ago, I wrote a story about Jessica Ai, breaking her silence on a lifetime of abuse. I did a story a little over a year ago on Felice Herrig, talking about all the health problems she was having, and those stories like that. And I just don't think I don't think it would have the same impact as a video. Yes, you could maybe see her tell the story, and I understand there are very powerful, documentaries and things like that to tell those stories. But I think when you're able to express it in the written word, I think it just comes across in a different way and kind of more powerfully in a way. So I think the two go hand in hand. Video is absolutely, the way of the future. I understand video is very popular, and I don't downplay video at all, but I still think there is a lot of value in the written word. I know personally, and maybe I'm just one of the people that's stuck in the past, but, I like reading articles. A guy like Chuck Mindenhall, who writes for MMAfighting.com, I absolutely adore reading his articles. Every time I see him, I tell him, I say, you make me a better writer, because I read his stuff and it's so good that I kind of have to sit back and evaluate what I'm writing, and it makes me a better writer. So I'm never going to give up on the written word, and I don't think anyone else should. I mean, I understand there's a way of the future with podcasting, which obviously we all do, and video content, of course, but I still am a big believer in the written word, and I just don't think it's ever going to completely go away. And at least I hope it never does, because I think reading and the written word in general, tells a story in the way nothing else can. And I think that, I think people still appreciate that. And that's a lot of what I've heard this last, week or so since this whole thing happened, was a lot of people saying, I like video, but I want to read about this stuff. I like reading the quotes. I like reading, the story of what actually happened. So, there's a lot of people out there still digesting the written word, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. And I know I'm not going to stop doing it.
I know, and if you want to read something sneakily at work, that's what you do. You can't watch a video sneakily at work. You might get fired. And I know when you were listing some of your favorite articles, you must have accidentally left out some of those great ones that you wrote about, some of the Submission Radio interviews that get sent to you from time to time.
Always.
You were very, very nice,
Always.
Very nice man about it, and put up on the Fox Sports Made Our Day. But let's talk about the crazy world of MMA and what's been going on in it. Even in a quiet week like this, there's still some stuff to talk about. The first thing we want to bring up is Dana White's interview recently, where he spoke about McGregor wanting to fight Khabib in Russia. Listening to Dana speak about this, you'd almost be sold that it's very, very likely that this could happen next after this Mayweather fight. Of course, if he loses against Mayweather, we're not really expecting it if he beats Mayweather somehow, but if he loses, he'd come back and fight Khabib in Russia. Casper, Are you buying this? Do you believe that McGregor is really sold on fighting Khabib as Russia as much as Dana sells that he is?
Yes and no. I guess it depends how you phrase that question. Do I believe McGregor is down to go down to Russia and fight Khabib? Yeah, absolutely. The man has an uncanny belief in himself, and I think that he 100% believes he will beat Khabib, even though a lot of people think it's a stiff test. And I think, what better way to do it than in his own backyard? And, he's made a career out of shutting up haters and doubters and critics, and I think McGregor, he always wants to top himself, and I think that'd be a really great spectacle and a great way to not top himself after the Mayweather fight, but, put on a big show. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think it's going to happen at all, and for simple reasons. It's got nothing to do with McGregor, it's more to do with the UFC. The pay-per-view markets, I believe there are only 4 in the world, and that is North America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. We are the only people who actually pay $50 or $60 per pay-per-view. Everybody else in the world, they get it as part of their cable package, and they pay their monthly fee, and that's it. So considering that's still the biggest revenue for the UFC is pay-per-view, they're not going to go to Russia and risk the massive dip in coverage from all the North American and Canadian and even Australian media. I mean, a lot of the people from Vegas, a lot of the people from North America, I'm sure, quite a few of them would make the trip. Obviously, when Ronda Rousey fought here in Melbourne, a lot of the big names in terms of journalism came down here in Melbourne, but I don't know how many people would go to Russia. And so, if you've got all the Russian media covering it, the pay-per-view buys will most likely dip. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to risk that for a Conor McGregor card, which, would usually and probably will always, as long as he's competing, do north of 1 million pay-per-view buys. You don't want to go from, say, 1.5 million to, say, 800,000 just because people in America or Canada or Australia, New Zealand, they weren't aware that the fight was happening, or they didn't see enough coverage. So, and furthermore, you've got cards like in Madison Square Garden, UFC 217 on November 4th, and then UFC 219, and that's the end-of-year card in Las Vegas at T-Mobile. So, no, I don't think the UFC is going to be doing any kind of McGregor versus Khabib fight in Russia. Definitely not this year. I think he'll either fight at UFC 217 or 219, and we're all going by the assumption that Conor McGregor does return after this. So if he does, I think it'd be for that. And if you listen to what Dana White say, he didn't say we're going to Russia. He just said Conor wants to do the fight in Russia. Well, Conor wanted to do the fight in Ireland. You want to do a bunch of fights in Ireland, and look, they're still not in Ireland. So I think it's just a great way for Dana White to show or show that Conor has, huge balls of steel without, the fight actually happening. And, they can always just say, look, we, the UFC, decided not to do it in Russia, and it makes Conor look good and it doesn't make him look bad. So that's my take.
The interesting thing here is, and I mean, this is something that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, Damon, as well. But from what I understand, there's a lot to gain from getting into Russia for most businesses, and it's super hard to do. Now, Casper mentioned the whole pay-per-view thing, but I'm wondering if there are some sneaky ways the UFC want to develop themselves in Russia and to develop some of those business deals. And I know from Conor McGregor's standpoint, his brand is huge, but making his brand massive in Russia and beating Khabib on a stage like that, that's just a license for him to print money, make deals, get into the business market over there, which is incredibly tough to do. You have to actually, people don't realize this, but you actually have to have very strong connections if you want to get into Russia. We've seen Roy Jones Jr. and a lot of other people try and get in there and spend a lot of time trying to get in there to make those business deals, to get in there and make that money. I think partly one of the things that McGregor is sort of drawn to this Russia thing is he realizes how much money he can make if he grows his name in Russia and makes those business connections in Russia. So I'm wondering, Damon, what kind of benefit would that? I mean, Casper mentioned the whole pay-per-view thing, and we all know that Russia's not big on pay-per-view, but what kind of money and how substantial could this be for the UFC if they do grow their brand in Russia and able to get in there with a fight like that? What's some of the stuff to gain that isn't sort of as visible to us outside of this whole crazy business world that a lot of people are in?
Well, Russia is just another big market that is really untapped. I mean, we've seen it with, Fight Night Global and ACB and some of the other organizations over there that have done shows, that there is definitely a rabid market for MMA in Russia. And there's, going to be money spent and money earned in a show like Russia. And you're going to get a whole different fan base kind of, enthusiastic about a fight like that, especially if you have a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, a local guy, to fight on the card. I put a video out about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I didn't put it out. Khabib did. I did a story about it where Khabib was in a Reebok store in Russia, and like the people went nuts. It was like 3,000 people showed up just for an appearance at a freaking Reebok store. I mean, people are rabid for it over there. So I think if you do a fight in Russia, you're going to open up a whole new market. You're going to have a rabid local fan base, and especially if you put a star on there like Khabib Nurmagomedov. I mean, for as big as Fedor has been throughout his entire career, and Fedor Emelianenko has kind of been the face of Russian mixed martial arts, I think it all switches if you put Khabib in the UFC on there, because everything the UFC does is much bigger, much more attention. But ultimately, I have to agree with Casper. I just don't think it's going to happen, especially for a fight like this. You may get them to do a show over there. You may even get them to do a big show over there like Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. I could see them doing that, but they're never going to put Conor over there. Conor is too much of a star to put on a Russian card. I understand exactly what Casper said is 110% correct. That this is a marketing ploy from Dana White and the UFC to say, look, Conor is willing to do it. Yeah, I'm quite sure Conor is, absolutely. But are they going to do it? No, there's no way. The time difference would be a nightmare in and of itself for pay-per-view. They'd have a better chance of going to Ireland, where it's actually, it would still be, really tough with the time difference, but it'd be even tougher in Russia. I think on the East Coast time, Ireland is about 6 hours ahead of East Coast United States time. I think Russia is like 9 or 10 hours. So, it would be ridiculously tough to do a pay-per-view over there on local time or even later in the evening. So this is Dana White just making a point to say that Conor's willing to do it. And I'm quite sure Conor is willing to fight anybody, and he's willing to go anywhere to do it. But we all should know it's not going to happen. Not for Conor. It might be Khabib at some point down the road, but Conor's going to fight in America where they can sell, the money they make on revenue at the gate and attendance alone would be dumb for them to go anywhere else with Conor. He's going to fight in Vegas. He's going to fight in New York. He's going to fight maybe in Boston again at some point in the future. He might fight in LA at some point in the future. But internationally, unless they go to Ireland at some point, which I think they could do to appease Conor McGregor and the Irish fans, he's not going anywhere else outside of the United States.
Well, there you go. If it does eventually happen one day, I would love to see a Russian show. And I think like a Russian UFC show. And I think from what I understand, the Russians, they really stick to, and I could be wrong, anyone who's listening now who is Russian or lives in Russia, if I'm wrong, by all means comment and let us know. But I think the Russians, they stick with their own. And apparently, even though like you've got MMA promotions like ACB and ones that are not nearly as big as the UFC, the Russians are more, I guess, they know their own fighters a lot more than they know UFC fighters. And so if the UFC went and did like a pay-per-view as the opening card, a lot of people might not know, what the hell the UFC is exactly, or at least not the way we would imagine it. But I guess when you talk about Khabib, you can't go past the fact of what exactly is next for Khabib. Because when this fight with Tony Ferguson initially fell out at the start of the year, people thought, well, how do you keep Tony Ferguson busy? If Khabib is going to be on the sidelines, he's going to be doing Ramadan, which I think ended June 24th. In the meantime, how do you get Tony Ferguson back on the horse? He's healthy. He's ready to fight. And so now here we are. It's already July. Ramadan's finished. Khabib can go back to training. And you kind of think, well, maybe we should just do this fight that, everybody wanted from the very beginning. Khabib wants this fight. Tony wants this fight. The timeline kind of matches up perfectly. They could do it in the next, 2-3 months. I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think, Damon? Are you a fan of redoing this fight? I know Tony's sort of been a bit, I wouldn't say desperate, but he's been looking at other avenues. He's been saying maybe Edson Barboza, maybe Nate Diaz. That looks like it's not going to happen. Do you want to just see the UFC rebook Khabib versus Tony at this point? What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, listen, I'm with everybody that understands the frustration that this fight has been scheduled and canceled on 3 different occasions, because I was at UFC 209 in March, and I remember sitting at that early weigh-in when we started getting reports that Khabib was out and the fight with Tony was canceled. The mood in that room just dropped dramatic. Everyone was like, come on. Like, we were all, as much as anyone was looking forward to Woodley and Wonderboy, and I don't want to take away from that great fight, but everyone at that moment was just like, come on. Like, we were all just depressed is the best way to say it, that fight got canceled. So I understand the frustration of putting it on yet again, but you would hope that 4th time's the charm, you hope, and so I think you do have to make it, because it is the only one that really does declare a true #1 contender to the lightweight title, because I think Khabib and Tony both have arguments of why they should be the guy in that division. And I think if you put them together, I think what's most likely is September. That way the winner is still available to fight in December, hypothetically, if Conor actually does come back in December. You put Khabib and Tony on that UFC 215 card in Edmonton. It's not as big of a market, but then, they're probably going to end up headlining that card with maybe Demetrius Johnson or another fight of that ilk. I'm sure the Canadian fans are not going to be too jazzed about that, but that's kind of what I see happening is maybe Khabib and Tony as the headliner for the interim lightweight title, and then maybe Demetrius Johnson against Ray Borg as the co-main event. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully the fight stays together and they have it. But I just think, listen, I love Edson Barboza. I would love to see Edson Barboza and Tony Ferguson throw down again. That first fight was amazing, and that was on 4 weeks' notice for Edson. Kevin Lee looked tremendous in his last fight. I think you could definitely throw him in that mix as well. But I think ultimately everyone still wants to see Khabib and Tony. I want to see Khabib and Tony. So I think if you can get it scheduled in September, I think you just got to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And a part of me, obviously, Tony's a very good fighter, but you just never know what's going to happen with that fight with Edson. If Edson does beat Tony, I feel like it takes a lot of steam away from Tony, and then that fight's not going to happen for a really long time. And I just think both guys are in such a good position to have that fight happen. And I agree with you, Damon. If they go sort of in that September time period and really smart about it, and, if things with Conor McGregor are as good as they say they are, if they're able to somehow get McGregor to sit in the front row and watch that fight happen, sort of build a whole story around him being there, watching the two guys duke it out, that could be even more exciting to see him and possibly what happens after that. But I think that is a very, very good fight. And both guys want the fight. I think the fight needs to happen. Just imagine that it gets put together one more time and falls apart one more time. I don't think the MMA community would be able to take that. That's brokenhearted.
Oscar De La Hoya would be writing letters saying the MMA community will never recover after this. But here's the thing, like, you never have any guarantees with any fight. Like, yes, this fight has kind of been plagued by injuries, but it's like you can say that about not any fight, but there is always that possibility for any fight. You can't not make fights that people want because they may fall apart. You have to take that risk. You have to take the gamble. And when a fight makes so much sense, you just have to do it. And here's the other thing. You mentioned timeline, and I think that's also sort of crucial. If they do it in, say, September, which isn't that far away, let's say it's a war, right? Regardless of whoever wins, let's say it's a war, or let's say someone suffers an injury. I don't even want to say anything aloud because I don't want to jinx it, but let's say there is an injury and they can't fight Conor McGregor in November, December, right? In comes Nate Diaz, the man who we've all been waiting for. Well, I don't know about waiting, but I think a lot of people want to see him come back. Everyone always thinks that he's been, waiting for this third fight with Conor McGregor, which I tend to believe is true. All right, if you don't have Tony or Khabib ready in December, you can do an end-of-year card with Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. If I was Ari Gold, I'd be saying boom.
Yeah. I mean, that would be amazing. So many people would love that. So it's almost like the UFC have a couple of aces up their sleeve no matter what happens there. Speaking of injuries, though, Damon, Cerrone and Lawler have been moved to UFC 214. I mean, the card is absolutely stacked at the moment. It doesn't look like it could get any better. But from the perspective of how important this fight is to the welterweight division, what do you think is up for grabs here? Because we haven't seen Lawler in a really, really long time. Cerrone's sort of taken a break after his loss. What do you think is up for grabs in this fight?
Well, I think for one, it's a great fight, an exciting fight to get people interested in this fight, because I think everyone, as soon as it was mentioned last year at UFC 205, everyone was excited for it. So I think that's part one. I think part two is Robbie Lawler getting back in action. I think people, almost, I don't want to say they forgot about Robbie Lawler, but I mean, it's kind of hard to forget this guy was a two-time defending champion, one of the most exciting fighters in the sport, a huge knockout artist. He got caught and finished by Tyron Woodley, who is now the best welterweight in the world. And Robbie Lawler's a guy people love to watch. And, and right now, that division, we have, Demian Maia looking great. Obviously, Jorge Masvidal's kind of come out of nowhere, become a contender. It looked like Cowboy Cerrone was going to be one of those guys. But I think, Robbie Lawler reintroduces a lot of interesting factors, in potential fights going forward in that division, because he is such an exciting guy, and he was a champion. And with Carlos Condit out and seemingly not planning on returning, I think Robbie Lawler is kind of like that guy who always goes in there, puts on exciting fights. And I think it's going to be good to have him back, because, if Robbie Lawler can go out there and knock out Cowboy Cerrone, which is kind of the way I feel like that fight will go, but maybe I'll change my mind closer to UFC 214. But if Robbie Lawler wins that fight and maybe one more, we could be poised for a rematch with him and Tyron Woodley, or, maybe him and Georges St-Pierre finally get the chance to fight. So Lawler, this is a big moment for Lawler, because he gets to kind of reestablish himself. And for Cerrone, if he can go out there and beat Robbie Lawler, he kind of erases a little bit of what happened in the Jorge Masvidal fight. I mean, it doesn't absolve that loss by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Robbie Lawler is higher ranked. He's a former champion. So if you can go out there and beat him or knock him out, it kind of puts Cerrone right back to where he was before the Masvidal fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with this whole part about the MMA world kind of forgetting about Robbie. I feel like, when we're talking about welterweight, I'm guilty of this sometimes as well. I forget that Lawler is sort of waiting in the wings and is ready to rock back in. And as soon as this fight happens, I'm expecting, the MMA world to blow up and be like, wait a minute, Robbie Lawler is here. And if he beats Cerrone in a devastating fashion, bang, that adds another guy back into the discussion as to what's going to be happening next with the welterweight division, which also, that title fight is happening in UFC 214 between Woodley and Maia. So the whole thing has played out to be very, very interesting.
And I think the fact that, I'm with you guys 100%. I think the fact that this is such a tantalizing fight, stylistically on paper, you would think this is going to be fireworks, and I think that is overshadowing how important this actually is for the division, because we don't really know what's going on with GSP. I mean, Dana White, I watched that video, it was on MMA Junkie, where he said that the GSP will probably fight, but if you kind of look at the wording again, he's not really saying GSP is going to be fighting next. And Damon, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way he kind of said it was like, oh, this opens the door for GSP to come back and challenge for the belt. And then he kind of looked away, took a sip of his water, and I don't know, you can read into a million things in terms of body language, but I thought, this doesn't seem anything concrete to me. I don't know if George is even aware. I think George came out and said that he's still anticipating fighting Bisping. Not sure where Bisping is at the moment, but I think he's pretty keen on fighting GSP as well still. So I think that if, let's say GSP does still fight at middleweight, let's say somehow he does end up doing that, this is probably the next contender for the belt. Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley, or imagine Cerrone versus Maia, the fight that they wanted a long time ago, or even Cerrone versus Woodley. So I think this is really, if you look at the division and who really is next in line, there's nobody else that's clear. A lot of guys kind of lost and fell apart, and now Maia is, Steve Wonderboy Thompson's still kind of rebuilding himself, hasn't had a fight since the loss. Lawler is one fight removed from being the champion, so whoever wins this, they might even be facing the winner of Woodley Maia. But I'm curious what you think, Damon, as far as this GSP situation, is or isn't. Do you really think he'll be facing the winner of Woodley Maia?
I wish I had a clear-cut answer for this, but nobody seems to know, because George clearly still wants to fight Michael Bisping. Dana seems to think he's going to fight the winner of Woodley and Maia. I think Georges St-Pierre is probably the closest to Conor McGregor in terms of personal power in what he does next, because George was done. I mean, he walked away from the sport. He made a lot of money, and he didn't really have a lot of interest in coming back, it seemed. I mean, he was seemingly completely okay with being out of the sport. So I think George is ultimately going to get more of what George wants, and George wants Michael Bisping. And I think a lot of this is Dana White trying to show his power a little bit by saying that George is going to fight who I want him to fight. But ultimately, I think George does still hold a lot of power, especially with the unknown factor of what's going on with Conor McGregor. Because as much as Dana touts that Conor's going to come back by December, there's no guarantee in that. There's none whatsoever that he's actually going to come back in December. Maybe he beats Mayweather. And if he beats Mayweather, he's going to rematch Mayweather. There's zero doubt he's not coming back to the UFC. He's rematching Mayweather, and he's going to make $250 million the next time. If he loses, who knows? Maybe he gets busted up. Maybe he gets a broken orbital bone and he can't fight for 6 months. There's just a lot of unknown factors in that you can't guarantee he's going to fight in December. And then at that point, Georges St-Pierre is the biggest fight in 2017 outside of UFC 214 at the end of this month, and his return is probably still even bigger. So he has a lot of power in what he does, and I think he's made it clear he wants Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping wants him, and I think that's still a big enough fight if you headline the card at Madison Square Garden on November 4th. So as much as I think the Tyron Woodley or Demian Maia versus GSP fights would be great, I still think he does hold a certain amount of power that is going to play into who he actually fights, which is why I still lean towards the fight with Bisping being the one that happens.
Exactly right. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Let's switch topics for a second and go to the world of boxing, as Australia saw a huge upset in Brisbane with Jeff Horn beating Manny Pacquiao in a boxing match. That's right, guys. If you're not following boxing very often, you would have heard that Jeff Horn, Brisbane guy, teacher, someone that was relatively unknown to the sporting world, even here in Australia, unless you're a hardcore boxing fan, you didn't really know who Jeff Horn was able to walk away with a win over Manny Pacquiao. Of course, there's a lot of controversy about that win. Damon, how did you see the fight going?
I actually had it scored a draw, so it was close. So I don't think it was nearly as controversial as some people made it out to be. I think if you're like, you put a gun to my head and said you had to make me decide who won the fight, I would lean Pacquiao, but I actually thought it was a draw. I thought it was very, very close. I thought Jeff Horn went out there and had some great rounds, definitely won some rounds in there. I like Pacquiao absolutely won some rounds in there. I didn't agree. It's weird when you have a decision like that and everyone throws up their arms and says it's controversial and this guy got robbed and things like that. To me, when it's a really close fight like that, I just don't see it being a robbery. I mean, I thought it was a draw, and I think if you forced me to pick, I would say I'd lean towards Pacquiao, but I don't really think it's that. I don't think it's as controversial as everyone's making it out to be. Yes, it was a close fight, but when you have a close fight like that, and it's just a matter of a couple of rounds that can make a difference in a fight like that, I think that's what really paid off here. So, Jeff Horn went out there and had the fight, the performance of his life, and he beat a legend in Manny Pacquiao. And not to bring this full circle or anything, and people are going to hammer me for saying this, but no one was picking Jeff Horn. No one's picking Conor McGregor. I'm telling you right now, these are the kind of situations where you start to have that glimmer of hope that a guy like Conor McGregor could somehow shock the world and beat a Floyd Mayweather. Because, to be honest, you just said Jeff Horn is not even very well known in his own country, and he went out there and beat Manny Pacquiao. I think Pacquiao's, 38? And they're talking about, Manny Pacquiao, maybe the rematch in the Philippines and doing that as his retirement fight. Like I said, man, when I see things like that happen, it makes me think, man, anything really is possible in combat sports. So you just never know.
I think the interesting thing here is, Damon, I mean, a lot of people, and a lot of people are pissed off that Horn won. Let's not beat around the bush here. Manny Pacquiao, he holds the hearts of a lot of boxing fans. He has hardcore fans around the world. The Philippines probably practically died when they saw him lose. He's a huge, huge name. And a lot of that negativity came from the fact that, from the disappointment of him losing. But why aren't people giving Jeff Horn the credit that he deserves? I mean, this is a young guy who walked out there and was able to go for most of the rounds and just push the action and just keep going. I mean, at the beginning of the fight, Pacquiao kind of laughed at him because, Jeff Horn was putting his foot down, pedal to the metal. But near the end of the fight, apart from that one round where he did get landed on quite a bit of a Pacquiao, he was still going. Why aren't people giving Jeff Horn the credit that he deserves for his performance, in your opinion?
Well, I think it comes down to, everyone, listen, when it comes to boxing or mixed martial arts, everyone loves a controversy, so I think that's what it comes down to. And if you're asking me like a worst decision, I thought Tim Bradley beating Manny Pacquiao was a far more egregious decision than what happened in the Jeff Horn fight. I think when you have a legend of the sport that kind of carries around, just to kind of correlate, it's kind of like when people say, when you fight a champion, you have to go and beat that champion. Like the champion kind of gets the edge. You know that saying, like where they say you have to go out and you have to really beat the champion, which I think is just dumb. I think it's one of the dumbest things you can say. A fight is a fight. The winner is the winner. I don't care who walks in with the belt. And I think when you hold Manny Pacquiao in a certain esteem, people make it sound like it's a bigger robbery than what it was. Was it close? Was it a very close, tight decision? Yes. I don't think anyone got robbed here. And I think it's just the fact that Manny Pacquiao is a legend, one of the greatest boxers of all time. And when he loses in a very, in a very close fight with a guy who probably, those people say, oh, this guy didn't deserve to be in there with him, and then he loses, it just sets people off. They expect a guy like that to win. They expect Manny Pacquiao to go out there and do what he does.
And Damon, you mentioned the rematch in the Philippines and how that's basically the plans, and Freddie Roach talked about how this would, he wants this to be the final fight of Manny Pacquiao's career after a very, very accomplished and illustrious career. Kind of crazy. I don't think anybody really expected this to, maybe be the way that it would happen. What do you think about that, and the fact that he doesn't want Manny to fight Mayweather again? What do you think about that? What do you think about if that ends up being the way Manny finishes his career, potentially in the Philippines against a guy like Jeff Horn, who, like Dennis mentioned, everybody understands, wasn't a well-known guy until just this past fight?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Manny Pacquiao's done a lot for himself, and he's gone out there and won championships. He's made a ton of money. He's obviously an icon in his home country in the Philippines. So I think it makes sense. I mean, listen, one thing Dana White says, and I know a lot of people get mad when they talk about, what Dana White says, because, it's kind of hard to believe what he says sometimes. But one thing he says that I would say is 95% true most of the time is fighting is a younger man's sport. That's absolutely true. And that's really not a controversial statement, because sports in general is a younger man's sport. Look at baseball, look at soccer, look at football, look at any sport out there. The older you get, you start losing a step here and there. Now, of course, there's guys like Yoel Romero who are 40 years old and still a freak of nature. But, for the most part, when you get into your late 30s and early 40s, you miss a step. That's just harder on the body. And Manny Pacquiao's losing a step a little bit. I think he's 38. He's gone through some real wars in his career. I think that knockout he had against Juan Manuel Marquez a few years ago really changed him, because he had never been flatlined like that before. And that was just a vicious knockout. And I think that's just one of those things. Then you had that performance against Mayweather, which was just an ugly fight. And then he came out afterwards and talked about how he had the shoulder injury. And I think, that to me, listen, I understand everyone fights injured, but you just don't want to come out and make it sound like you're making excuses. He's done everything he needs to do. He's had an incredible career. I think if you rematch Jeff Horn, you do it in the Philippines, you go into that area and maybe he avenges the loss potentially. And then he goes out on a high note. Or if he loses again, maybe you create a new star in a Jeff Horn, and you can actually put him out there in some of these big, welterweight type matchups. Now that we've got guys like, a Triple G fighting Canelo, and guys like that, the lower weights, maybe you have a new star in Jeff Horn. So I think it makes a lot of sense, because what else is Manny Pacquiao going to do? We're not going to see him fight, freaking Canelo and Golovkin. That's not going to happen. And what else is out there really for him that he's going to accomplish by fighting at 39, 40 and continuing to put, these other guys over in his career? I just don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, and I don't think many people want to see that second fight with Mayweather, and Mayweather wouldn't want to do that fight again as well. So it's a good way to go out. Speaking of Dana White, though, and the things that he says, he did go on Instagram and he said Bob Arum equals the dumbest motherfucker in boxing history. So my question to you, Damon, was, looking at this fight, Pacquiao versus Horn, and again, we're Australian. This fight didn't really make sense to me, but I thought Pacquiao was going to destroy Horn. I didn't realize Horn was going to go out there and win it. What was the mindset behind Pacquiao taking this fight, in your opinion? Was it the fact that Horn would be an easy win, or do you think there was something else behind it that, sort of motivated him to come into Australia and fight a pretty much unknown guy?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think, you look at what happened with Anthony Joshua earlier this year when he fought Vladimir Klitschko in England, and they had like 90,000 people show up to Wembley Stadium, and it was an insanely huge card. Now, did the fight turn out to be a success in England and other places? Absolutely. But it didn't necessarily make Anthony Joshua a star in the United States. And I've had this argument with people. He's starting to get his name out there, but he's still not a star yet in boxing in America, which is still, as much as people may argue with me about it, it's still the mecca of sports is the United States of America for sports like boxing and mixed martial arts. So I think they had the opportunity to go down to an Australian stadium where they sold, 50,000 tickets? I mean, just the visuals of that is kind of stunning. Because there's really no one Pacquiao would have fought here in America that would have drawn like that. His last couple of fights haven't really been that way, and I think he's kind of gotten soured a little bit the same way people were soured on Floyd Mayweather when he fought Andre Berto, and he did like 300,000 pay-per-view buys because people got irritated by what happened in the Pacquiao fight. So I think, that was the big factor. You get 50,000 people in a stadium, and it's going to look huge on television, one. Two, I think the ESPN deal was a big deal for them. They were going to try to put it on free TV and make a big deal out of that. Manny Pacquiao is a draw to a certain extent. I don't think he's as much of a draw as some people make him out to be, because I think he's kind of been the product of the people he's fought. Like when he fought De La Hoya, when he fought Mayweather, he was more kind of like the hardcore boxing dream, the guy that was so good. Everyone always talked about him, but he never really drew huge numbers outside of some of those big key fights. And I think three was, I believe, that the promoter and maybe even Manny Pacquiao thought this was going to be a cakewalk. They were going to go out there and beat up Jeff Horn because Jeff Horn was kind of a nobody. No one really gave him a shot in this fight, and it was supposed to be kind of a spotlight fight for Manny Pacquiao to, you can sell it by saying he's going into enemy territory and he's taking on this young gun, but no one was really giving Jeff Horn a chance. So we can sit back and say now it was a massive mistake to go into Australia and fight a guy in his home soil, but no one was saying that going into the fight. And that's one of the reasons I hate this whole revisionist history that a lot of combat sports people and even journalists play sometimes, is because before the fight, no one was saying that it was a bad idea. No one was saying he shouldn't have taken this fight. Everyone was saying, wow, he's going to get paid $10 million to go out there and fight a bum who doesn't deserve to be in there with Manny Pacquiao. Now, afterwards, everyone said, oh, how could you let him do that? How could you let him fight him? Because it wasn't that way going in. It's just because he got upset in a huge upset that everyone's now saying it was a terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy turn of events, but like you mentioned, it is one of the things that I guess we love most about combat sports, the unpredictable nature, and I don't know, man. This McGregor Mayweather fight, I don't know. I'm so torn about it. I'm gonna say it now. I still think Mayweather's gonna win, but I don't know. I really do hope McGregor wins because, like you pointed out, it would be so much more fun. Imagine if they do the rematch. I'm getting excited just thinking about it. Let's talk about UFC 213. We'll move on before we let you go. Damon, I think there's a couple more things to talk about, but let's talk about UFC 213. It's this weekend. A lot of great fights this weekend. Obviously, Tough 25, the finale, the Tough 25 redemption. But in terms of UFC 213, we want to get your predictions, seeing as this kind of, a UFC 213 flavored preview show. And we'll kick things off with Overeem versus Werdum. Dennis and I will give our thoughts, but we'll go with you first. If you had to give a prediction, if you had to give thoughts on this fight, what are you going with, Damon?
I give a slight edge to Alistair Overeem in this fight because, their second fight that they had in Strikeforce, which was kind of abysmal, so I wouldn't recommend anyone really go out and watching it unless you're struggling to get to sleep at night because it was really not a good fight. It was basically Werdum body flopping down to his back and then Overeem kicking his legs for the better part of 15 minutes. But I think, Werdum has worked tirelessly on his striking, which I think benefits him in a lot of fights like he showed against Cain Velasquez and some other fights. But I think that can also get him into some danger against a guy like Alistair Overeem because Werdum likes to work from the clinch. He showed that in the fight with Cain, which was interesting because Cain is such a dominant clinch fighter. And so I think Overeem kind of eats guys' lives with his knees, and his takedown defense is really good. His takedowns are really good. So, and I think Overeem's also been more active. I mean, yes, he lost to Stipe, but that was a fight where he was, maybe a couple punches away from winning when he hurt Stipe. He came back and, and demolished Mark Hunt. I like Overeem to win this fight. I don't think Werdum, being out, since September, he looked good against Travis Brown, but I don't think he looked great against Travis Brown. So I'm leaning Alistair Overeem to kind of close out this rubber match with a win.
I agree with you, Damon. Werdum as of late has not been impressing me, and I'm not sure what's going on with him. I mean, he's only a couple of years older than Overeem, but when I look at both fighters, I really think Overeem's getting to a place where he's probably his sharpest, most dangerous, most strategic. And in this fight, it's just, to me, this isn't the same Werdum that I saw, for example, beat Mark Hunt at UFC 180 or fight Travis Brown in 2014 at UFC on Fox. This is the other Werdum who fought Travis Brown at UFC 203. So going into this, I think Overeem's going to do it. I don't think it's going to be a fight that finishes early. If I have to pick a time and place that it happens, I'll probably say that Overeem TKOs Werdum in the third round. But yeah, I am definitely leaning towards Overeem here.
I think we're all in agreement that Overeem's just looked phenomenal recently. I think it was very impressive, and I think I did say it was his best performance or MMA performance of his career, Overeem's, or at least the new Overeem, USADA Overeem. I was very impressed the way he took out a still very dangerous Mark Hunt. I mean, he was so efficient, so technical, and he even overcame adversity in the fight where Mark Hunt, I believe he landed that big elbow. And normally we've seen Overeem crumble when he gets tagged with a big shot. It's kind of the beginning of the end, and he did really well, and that's something that he's never been known for. So I think he's just in a perfect place. He's in a great camp. Jackson Winklejohn is in a good place mentally, and he's the most well-rounded and composed of his entire career. I think it's funny because in a sense, Werdum, this new age Werdum who actually has a very good striking arsenal, he's got, I think, more tools to beat Overeem overall. Like he can beat Overeem on the feet theoretically. Overeem has, his chin has always been suspect, and Werdum, if anything, he is competent on the feet, and then on the ground, he holds a large advantage. He's obviously got the supreme BJJ, but Overeem is just so good at what he does in his distance management and fighting on the outside. They have improved drastically recently. He's not the same Overeem who just charges in and sort of feels like he's invincible, blasts knees, and sort of hangs in the pocket and doesn't really care about the consequences. He's very, I guess, economic these days, and he's been just so good on the outside. I think Werdum, if he wants to win this one, I think he needs to make it a really ugly fight, get in on the inside, take it to Overeem, pressure him, and really, get in close without getting Stipe'd. And I think Overeem, honestly, he's going to be too good. He's likely to throw those 1 or 2 strike combinations like last time and try and pick Werdum apart on the outside and avoid getting that takedown. And if Werdum goes in the clinch, Overeem, I think, will be able to bully him against the cage and beat him up with the knees. So I don't know. These guys aren't exactly cardio machines. I wouldn't be surprised if it slowed down a little bit towards the third. So I think Overeem, he earns a pretty solid decision win here, and I think he's going to look pretty good doing it. Let's move on. Yoel Romero, Robert Whittaker. Damon, be very careful what you say, because all of your Australian fans might jump ship if you make the wrong prediction here. I'm just kidding. Be honest with us. What do you think is going to happen? Romero versus Whittaker. I'm not going to lie. I'm really struggling to make an official pick for this one. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I tell you what, this is my favorite fight of the weekend, and it's also the toughest one to pick. I mean, this is as good as a fight as you can get. You got Robert Whittaker, who is a knockout artist, tremendous technical striking, but also, doesn't mind getting into that kind of slugfest mentality where he can go out there and knock somebody out just by kind of going wild and throwing his hands, as he showed in the fight with Derek Brunson. But then when he's got that pinpoint accuracy, like he showed against Jacare Souza, where he just waits for that opening and then explodes. And I think the scariest thing about Robert Whittaker is he's getting better. I don't think he's even reached his pinnacle yet. I think he's getting better, as we've seen in his last couple of fights. And then with Yoel Romero, here's a guy who doesn't throw with volume, but he throws with such creativity and power that you rarely see what he has coming. Look what he did to Lyoto Machida. Look what he did to Chris Weidman. This is a guy who is never out of a fight. I mean, this is a guy who has incredible endurance, incredible ability to bounce back from a bad round or a bad 2 rounds. I mean, look, he lost 2 rounds in a row to Derek Brunson, comes out and explodes in the 3rd round. Lost a round to Chris Weidman, comes out, in that 3rd, explodes and gets that knockout. So I think my pick, and I picked earlier this week, I'm going to stick with it because I flip-flopped, nonstop. My pick has continuously been Robert Whittaker. I think his accuracy and his striking on the feet are going to be a big difference because Yoel Romero has really fallen in love with his striking. He's very explosive and very powerful, but I think Robert Whittaker is a little more technical and he has the same kind of power in his hands. So I'm leaning Robert Whittaker to win by knockout, maybe late 3rd, even early 4th round. But this is a toss-up of all toss-ups because I could absolutely see Yoel Romero going out there just surprising everyone, landing some crazy spinning back fist or some exploding, jumping knee off the cage or something, and winning this fight just as well. This is my favorite fight by far of the weekend, the one I'm most looking forward to, but I'm leaning Robert Whittaker by TKO.
It's going to be an exciting fight, Damon. I agree with you. I think that Robert Whittaker's striking, his accuracy, also his footwork and his speed, it's going to be a big deal in this fight. And even though I believe Yoel Romero has a really good chance of beating him, I am actually leaning to Robert Whittaker winning this by TKO in the 1st or the 2nd round. I think, to me, it feels like he'll capitalize before Yoel Romero is sort of able to get into a zone around the 3rd round. I think we're just scratching the surface with Robert Whittaker. He's able to do so much. And when this fight comes to play, I think we may see the best version of Robert Whittaker yet. It just seems like the harder the opponent gets, the more he's willing to step up to the challenge and go up on the big stage and show off his skills. Mentally, he's super strong. I'm really excited for this fight. So to me, it's Robert Whittaker by TKO in the 1st, but I'm more leaning towards the 2nd round. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm like everyone else, really. I was flip-floppy on this fight last night. I was watching some tape on Yoel Romero and just Jesus, this guy's athleticism is ridiculous. So just some of the fights, I mean, when he came in there and he beat up Brad Tavares against the cage and just effortlessly pulled his feet out from under him, took him down. Some of the things in the Weidman fight where I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I think he tripped up Weidman and then took his back, and it just looked like something out of the Matrix. And I think a lot of people mention, you mentioned this before, Damon, how, Romero, he's not really a volume striker, but the thing is he's doing two things even when he's not throwing. A, he feints a lot. He does feint a lot, and I think sometimes it can freeze his opponents a bit, but he's also very, very good at reading his opponents, and I think that's why you see, for a guy who has such suspect cardio, he has so many finishes in the third round because he's able to figure out his opponent's timing. He's like what people spoke about Anderson Silva back in the day, where Anderson was like this computer, and the first round is dedicated to just storing information, analysis, and then figuring out how to use that information. I think with Yoel Romero, it's a similar thing, except it takes him a little bit longer. It takes him maybe the first round, the second round. By the third, he's kind of figured out he's very good at adapting. And then he uses all that information to pick this, crazy strike, and he times it well. Like, with Weidman, that knee, it wasn't an accident. It was completely on purpose. He figured out what Weidman's tendencies were, and then he knocked him out. And I think that, I guess with Whittaker, if he's going to beat him, I think he has a big advantage in the early rounds. Do it before Romero is able to sort of figure him out, figure out his timing. We saw against Drakkar and other fights, Whittaker really mixes up his strikes. He's known for his big left, but he can also hurt you with his big right, which I think he did to Drakkar. He has kicks as well, so he's very dangerous in all facets, and I think he's really going to have to mix things up and pressure and confuse Romero in order to be successful. There's also wrestling. I mean, Romero, when he's losing the fight in striking, it was happening against Weidman, he can just default to his wrestling at any given time, and he's not necessarily going to take you down, beat you up on the ground, but he can put you up against the cage and just wear you out. So even though he's not known for his great cardio, if he wears down Robert Whittaker, how is Rob going to look in, the third, the fourth, the fifth round? Will he be worn down from all the wrestling? So there really are so many factors, but I honestly think that Rob will be by far and is the most technical and aggressive striker that Romero has faced in a long time, if ever. And I do see him catching Romero early on. Like you mentioned, Romero has really fallen in love with his wrestling, and I think it might cost him. I think if Romero wins, you could definitely see it happen. It'll probably be some kind of like crazy backflip into like a spinning elbow, and he'll defy gravity. But I think Robert Whittaker via round 2 KO. That's my official, not so confident pick. Let's move on to the main event. Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko. I don't really need to say much about this one, other than I think the pressure is on Amanda here, really, after her last 2 fights, going up against someone who she's already beaten, who isn't as big a name as Misha or Ronda. What do you think, Damon? How do you see this one playing out?
This is another one I've been completely torn on because I was at the first fight between these two, and I remember, Amanda dominating in the first round, and then she kind of ran out of steam a little bit in the second, and then by the third round, Valentina had taken over. The second round was a lot closer than I think a lot of people remember. I mean, Amanda won the round, don't get me wrong, but it was a close, a close round, and then obviously Valentina came back in the third, and I think Valentina has gotten even better since then. I mean, she diced up Holly Holm for the biggest part of 5 rounds. Then she goes out there and taps out Juliana Pena, which I think was a surprise to a lot of people, considering how good of a wrestler and how good of a submission artist Juliana Pena is. So I'm leaning, it's tough for me to pick this, but I'm leaning Valentina Shevchenko. I think she moved to Colorado specifically to work on her conditioning because she wanted to be able to push the pace for 5 rounds. Now, Amanda Nunes is still a berserker, a dangerous, nasty fighter in that first round. She put a lot of damage on Valentina in that first round in their first fight. Valentina can ill afford to do that again because I think Amanda has gotten better, and I think she's gotten more confident in her ability to go out there and just kind of steamroll people in that first round. But we've just never seen anyone be able to do that to Valentina Shevchenko. People have taken her down, and I think her worst round was probably that first round against Amanda, but she still survived and played good defense. And I think with each passing minute in this fight, the more it starts to favor Valentina Shevchenko, because for all of the addressing that Amanda Nunes has done about her conditioning on paper, she talks about it, we still haven't seen it. She had the fight against Kat Zingano where her conditioning failed. She had the fight against Valentina Shevchenko where the third round, her conditioning failed. Until we can see her deep into the third round or even the fourth round in a championship fight, we can't say just based upon her words that she actually has improved her conditioning and cardio. So I'm leaning Valentina Shevchenko by either a late TKO, fourth or fifth round, or she wins by decision. But like I said, Amanda Nunes could go out there and just absolutely maul her in the first round, and she never even sees the second round. But I'm leaning, and I know that's terrible, but I'm leaning Valentina Shevchenko, and I think it's late TKO or a decision in the end.
It's funny, Damon. It seems like, we're agreeing on a lot of our predictions because I'm on the Shevchenko train as well. The great thing for Shevchenko is, how great is this matchup? You get an Amanda Nunes who's champion, but not only an Amanda Nunes who's champion, but Amanda Nunes who headlined UFC 200, beat Miesha Tate, beat Ronda Rousey, and Shevchenko already has that win over Holly Holm. So get this win over Amanda Nunes, and then bang, that's a pretty impressive CV you've got there. Unfortunately, I don't know how the UFC is going to go pushing her. I don't know how much people would be as excited with her being champion as if Nunes retained. But to me, I see Shevchenko winning this via decision. I agree with all the points that you said, Damon. I think Robin Black brought up some interesting points as well. If you're with Team Nunes, do you go with, we're going to try and save our cardio, we're going to play the Shevchenko game, we're going to try and make it to the fifth round, or are we putting all our marbles in, let's Vitor Belfort this person, let's get in there, let's win early, let's do what we do best, and let's catch us. I'm interested to see what happens there, but I think even if she does try to Vitor Belfort her, to me the feeling is Shevchenko survives through those first couple of rounds and then comes out the end of fifth round as the winner by decision.
I'd love to give like some kind of crazy hot take and say, well, I'm going to blow your minds with something that I disagree with all of you. But unfortunately, it's just not really the case. I agree with you 100% as far as what you just brought up, Dennis, with Robin Black, where do they go with what's always been working for her, or do they completely change it up and say, you know what, I know you're known as a finisher, Amanda, but we're really going to try and play the long game here. And sometimes fighters can reinvent themselves, kind of like Conor McGregor against Nate Diaz in the rematch. And sometimes it just doesn't go well for them, and it goes disastrously when they try and stray away from, what actually got them success in the first place. And the other thing is, Amanda, like you mentioned, Damon, Amanda has for a long time said that her cardio issues are a thing of the past. But that was for the Miesha Tate fight, UFC 200, where 2 fights removed, where she's finished the fight in the first round. And sometimes fighters, they're creatures of habit, and they fall in love with what works. So maybe if that was the case against Miesha Tate, do they just double down and go all in? And does Amanda Nunes, in the back of her mind, think, you know what, I'm prepared for 5 rounds, but in my mind, I think I'm going to finish in the first round. And if it doesn't finish in the first round, is she going to be in trouble, kind of like she was towards the end of the first fight? I think that with Valentina, for me, one of the biggest questions is, will Amanda be able to get Valentina to open up? Because I think Valentina's very disciplined, and she can be very stubborn. I think if she doesn't want to open up, I don't think she will. I think she made some very small mistakes in that first round that kind of cost her. She ended up on the ground, and I think if she can avoid that, which I think she can in this first round, I think it kind of changes the fight completely, and Amanda doesn't necessarily do as much damage. But who knows, if she doesn't do as much damage, she might not tire herself out. I think regardless, you got to look at history, and that is the Valentina, she's proven that she can go 5 rounds. Amanda has not proven. I think Valentina will be able to stave off Amanda in the first round, and I don't know, that's when things get interesting, the 3rd round, 4th round. And I'm like you, Damon, if Amanda is completely gassed and absolutely wrecked and tired in the 4th or 5th round, there may be a really late finish. But if I had to go for it, Shevchenko, she's not really known as a finisher on the feet, so I think that it's probably going to be a decision, Shevchenko being the new champion. And just quickly, before we cut to a movie preview, I'm just curious what you think, Damon, is best for business in terms of this fight, because Shevchenko, she's still building her name, she's not really that well known, and Nunes, it's funny because a while ago we were talking about how if it was Rousey versus Nunes, it would be a bit, of a disappointment because you could do Miesha versus Rousey, and that's a bigger fight. But alas, it happened, and Nunes is now, she's been building her name over the last year, literally since UFC 200. It's been in the Amanda Nunes show, and it seems like anybody who beats Ronda Rousey, they get this momentum, like Holly Holm and like Amanda Nunes, and that's what Amanda just got. And sometimes it kind of, I wouldn't say goes to waste, but it doesn't really turn them into the next big star who can carry the division. What do you think about this, Damon? And if Shevchenko wins, is the UFC kind of, restarting from scratch again as far as building their new biggest star?
Well, I don't think it's that, because listen, I'm a big Amanda Nunes fan. I think she's fantastic. She's one of the nicest people you'll ever have a chance to meet and talk to in person. I was down at American Top Team with Joanna Jędrzejczyk a couple months ago, and I ran into her a few times, and she came right up and said hello, and shook my hand, gave me a hug. Like, she's just that kind of person. She's a sweet person, and she's a great representative of the sport, and she's now got that confidence to where she's kind of speaking about it more. And I think she's a great representative for that division. The problem is, is that she just hasn't caught, a hold in terms of the audience. People willing to plunk down $60 to see her yet. And that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of fighters who are champions. There's a lot of people who are top, fighters in the division who haven't earned that $60 trust, let's call it, from fans who are willing to plunk down that money to see them fight every single time. So I don't think the UFC takes a big damaging blow if Amanda Nunes loses, because I think if she does lose, then you set up the rematch. Valentina and Nunes are now tied at 1 apiece. They go into a third fight, and maybe you do that in December. Maybe it's part of the, Conor McGregor's return, or if Conor doesn't return, maybe you put it on another big card like that, and you can kind of do the trilogy, something like that. Because again, Valentina is not the most outspoken person, and she's still kind of getting her own fan base built here in the United States. But I don't think you really lose a lot with her as champion, because I don't think Amanda Nunes has really conquered that market either, because I think the person that had the biggest chance to become a star in the post Rousey era was Holly Holm, because she's the one who kind of, she beat Rousey the first time. She had a chance to really become a star, and unfortunately she wasn't able to, to do that. She ended up losing, 3 fights in a row, and obviously she looked amazing in her last fight. But she's the one that had the chance to really kind of capture that enthusiasm and that attention after the Ronda Rousey thing, and unfortunately she just couldn't quite do it. So I think that whole beating Ronda Rousey and kind of becoming a star thing is dead. I think Holly was the one person who got that, and unfortunately she wasn't able to kind of take advantage of it. At this point, I don't think anyone is really going to be a massive star for right now. So I don't think you lose anything by Amanda losing, and I don't think it's really going to make a huge difference if she wins, that now she's won 3 in a row and suddenly she's a pay-per-view draw, because I just don't think she is.
There's only one logical fight for Shevchenko next, and that's a fight with GSP. Forget Bisping. Shevchenko versus GSP. You've got that highlight reel of her knocking GSP out. I don't know. It'll be great.
Shevchenko, Conor McGregor.
Or what about a 4-way? Conor McGregor, Shevchenko, GSP, and Michael Bisping. You just keep it neutral. Who knows? That sounds like it would be fun. But Damon, before we let you go, we want to quickly get a preview from you for the big Spider-Man movie that's about to come out. People know Nerdcore Movement, great website that you run. A lot of pop culture stuff there. So you're the man to talk about this with. A lot of people are saying that this could be the best Marvel superhero movie out yet. Where are you at with this? I know you haven't watched it yet. Do you believe this is possible? And what's your feeling from all the previews and things that you've read about this thing?
Well, I'm super excited. I got my tickets. I'm going opening night. I can't wait. I grew up in comic books, and my favorite comic book character growing up from the time I was like 4 years old until now has always been Spider-Man. So I've always been a little more critical of Spider-Man movies, because I've always kind of held that character close to my heart, because it's been my favorite since I was a little kid. I dressed up as Spider-Man when I was a kid for Halloween. I mean, I love Spider-Man. So I think that now that Marvel is involved in the filmmaking process along with Sony, and I think they recasted this movie perfectly. I think Tom Holland, introducing him in Civil War and Captain America Civil War was just an amazing idea, because it allowed him to kind of step into the role and get a little bit of shine, but then, not make the whole film around him. And I think that was brilliant. I loved him in that movie. Everything about him was great in that movie. And now he gets his own movie. I think bringing in Michael Keaton to play the Vulture is a great kind of twist, considering he was once Batman. Bringing in Robert Downey Jr. to play Tony Stark and kind of making him the mentor to a much younger Spider-Man. Spider-Man's in high school. I think it's going to be amazing. I really love the idea of this movie. I know the reviews have been amazing. I can't wait to see it. It's probably going to be, along with the new Star Wars movie coming out in December, probably my favorite movie that I'm looking forward to this year. And that's saying a lot, considering, Logan, Wonder Woman was amazing. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was amazing.
Get Out. I think did you watch Get Out? Did you enjoy that, Damon?
That was amazing. Yeah, exactly. So we've had some great films this year, but I am stoked beyond words for Spider-Man: Homecoming. I think it's going to be amazing. I think it's going to be great. And until Star Wars comes out in December, I think this is going to be the one to beat for the best movie of the year. But we'll find out in a couple days when it comes out.
Wow.
Don't forget Baby Driver. Baby Driver's on its way out as well. Apparently a great movie too.
Yeah, I need to see that. I've heard that's amazing. It's actually out here in the States. I haven't seen it yet. I'm actually going to try to catch it this weekend because I've heard it's outstanding. I want to see that as well. So, and that's Edgar Wright, of course, who was going to make Ant-Man, and then he dropped off the project. I'm a big fan of his work. Shaun of the Dead. All those movies are great. So I look forward to Baby Driver as well. That sounds like it's amazing. The reviews have been outstanding.
Well, there you go. A lot of stuff to look forward to in the future, but of course, in the short term, some great fights coming this weekend. We hope you enjoyed the preview show. A massive thank you to Robin Black, to Sean Sheehan, to Tommy Toehold for making a special appearance, and of course, the man that's been on the program for, I think, just a little bit over an hour. We've been really, really selfish and greedy with his time. The man known as Damon Martin. And Dennis at the start said, maybe the Buffet team is reuniting this year. Absolutely. At the end of the month, we'll be reuniting UFC 214. Damon, we always love having you on the program. Always appreciate your time. Of course, follow the man on Twitter at Damon Martin. He's on Flow Combat at the moment and MMA Weekly. A lot of great stuff coming from Damon Martin. Of course, nerdcoremovement.com for, we'll be sitting around waiting for this Spiderman review as soon as it drops. A massive thank you to you guys for listening to the program, and we'll be back next week with another episode.